Education for December 14th, 2021 is called to order. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tabs. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for bringing your gorgeous artwork. Really happy to see handmade posters. It's a why we need art classes, so you can letter correctly. It looks like we have a larger crowd than usual, and I just want to remind everybody that that we continue to follow Governor Brown's statewide indoor mask requirement for all indoor public settings, whether vaccinated or not. Tonight we have in place mitigation strategies to help keep everyone safe. That's members of the public and staff and students. The board members and staff in attendance are wearing masks, and most of us are boosted and vaccinated. We have air purifiers placed around the boardroom. And also just be aware of your surroundings and do your best to stand, give yourself some distance from those around you. And I want to just remind people to keep the aisles clear. If you're holding a sign, to please keep it low out of respect for others, to not block their vision, not block their view. We have a really full agenda tonight, and I'm really pleased to kick it off by recognizing the Grant girls soccer team. Woo! Go Generals! The Grant girls soccer team are the Division 6A state soccer champions. Woo! We know that students who have goals are the best. Students who make goals are golden, regardless of whether you scored. Keep up the great work. The soccer field is a proving ground for life, so stay out there. Keep that momentum going. And keep making those headers. Those are cool. Superintendent, would you like to introduce the next item?
I would love to, Chair DePass. I'm so pleased that we have with us here tonight our Grant High School women's soccer team. It was a brisk evening. I was there at Hillsborough, and it was a wonderful match, but in the end, our Grant women were just a bit too much for Beaverton. So we'll take the win. With us to tell us a little bit more about the victory and this awesome team is our Assistant Director of Athletics, Diallo Lewis, to share a few words about this incredible accomplishment of our Grant girls soccer team. And to introduce our coach and players. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here this evening. Again, I'm Diallo Lewis, one of the assistant directors for the PIL. And thank you again for giving us this opportunity to recognize the Grant girls soccer team for winning the 2021 OSAA 6A state championship. So the team this season, they finished the season with 17 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw, defeating, as Superintendent Guerrero shared, defeating Beaverton 4-3 in overtime on their way to winning the first state championship for the girls soccer program at Grant High School. And I'm going to turn it over to Coach Manoli. Coach Manoli is not only the head coach for the girls soccer program, but Coach Manoli also won a state championship on the boys' side in 2008 at Grant High School. So still, we've been doing quite a bit of research trying to find out if that's ever been done. But right now, I can say Coach Manoli is probably one of few, if not the only coach to ever win state championships on both the boys and girls side at the same school. Coach.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello?
We can hear you.
Thank you for the recognition and giving me a moment to talk about the team. As Diallo mentioned, this is the first girls soccer team to win the state championship for Grant High School. They finished the season with 17 wins, 1 loss, and a draw. Winning the state championship, it's a well-deserved achievement. All of the players work very hard, rain or shine, outside the high school soccer season to improve their game, stay fit, and be ready to compete when the high school season begins. This year, they won the PIL, and they did that going undefeated. We had 3 players make the PIL All-League team, and you guys can stand up when I call your name. Liv Frazier. Capriel Losher. And Elle Frazier. Elle was also PIL Player of the Year. Elle also was invited to play, and she did, in the All-American game that took place last Friday in Tennessee. But besides winning the 2021 state championship, the other achievement that I'm equally proud of is their academic achievement. The Grant girls soccer team finished first in the state with a combined grade average of 3.99. So besides being good on the field, they do read a little bit, so that's great. And now to introduce the 2021 6A State Championship team is my assistant coach, Christine Stenberg.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm also a Grant alum myself, so it's a special honor to be the assistant coach for these girls, but also represent Grant as a coach now. So if you guys could stand up by class, and I'll introduce you. We only have one freshman here tonight. Amalia Held. Yeah, great. Our sophomores want to stand up and come down. Abby Day, Sadie Siegel-Wilson, Maggie McGare, Erin McDivitt, Samara Meredith, and Bella Bone. Our juniors, Megan McDivitt. Come down in the front. There you go. Violet Holla, Sadie Thompson, Olivia Lukrofka, and KT Rosinger. And our seniors, please stand. Where are we? You guys all there? We have Mina, Liv and Al Frazier. I can't see who you guys are. Oh, Sophia Petrak and Capriel Losher.
Thank you again for taking the time to recognize this outstanding group of student athletes. Thank you.
And thank you, Diallo, and thank you, Coach Suanakis, and the rest of the team. Student Representative Weinberg, would you like to read the proclamation? And just to let you know, we have an opportunity to take a photo with the entire board in just a couple of minutes. So please don't go anywhere.
Yes.
Student Representative Weinberg.
It would be my honor to read this proclamation honoring Grant High School's girls soccer team on December 14th, 2021. Whereas the Board of Education and Superintendent recognize the significant accomplishments of the Grant High School girls soccer team, who earned the title of 2021 OSAA 6A Girls Soccer State Championship on November 13th, 2021. Whereas the Board of Education and Superintendent wish to thank the students for their teamwork and tenacity throughout this season. Whereas the Board of Education and Superintendent applaud the entire Grant community of teachers, students, parents, neighbors, and the team's exceptional coach, Manoli Suanakis, all of whom have supported and encouraged this team to be and play at their very best. Now, therefore, the Board of Education and Superintendent do hereby recognize and congratulate the Grant Generals soccer team in its accomplishment of an outstanding soccer season.
So we'll now assemble and take a team photo, and I am so sorry I missed that game. I actually had tickets to it from the opposing side. So I had a disguise ready. Nobody here would have recognized me. But I'm really sorry I missed it. We ended up not going.
We don't want to get in front of them.
Suanakis?
Everybody say cheese.
Don't choose us yet.
Squeeze in there, Herman.
You guys see me?
I can see you.
I'm not blocking him. Look at me, look at me. Generals on three. 1, 2, 3. It is tough.
All right. Way to go, you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to come.
Chair, I just want to recognize our Grant High School principal, James McGee, who I know is running out for a PTA meeting. The job of a principal is never over. Hard-working, Mr. McGee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Principal McGee. Okay. Our next agenda item is a board member declarations to be considered for board leadership. In May of 2021, the board adopted a new process by which board members could be considered for board leadership positions. We did this because there wasn't a clear path to become a leader on the board and to make improvements on the process. The resolution states that in order to be considered for a leadership position, board members must notify the current board chair in writing by December 1st if they plan to run for board leadership in the January election. Then at that first board meeting in December, which is tonight, the board chair will publicly confirm board members who are interested in serving in leadership. And again, we did that to make improvements on the process. It's not perfect yet, and I hope that we can get closer to perfection as we move together. I've had one person state that they would like to be considered for board leadership, and that is my my vice chair, Andrew Scott, and the board will vote on that leadership decision at the January 11th meeting. And that's what we have to say on that. And please allow me just a second. Oh.
You, right, Michelle?
I'm so sorry, yes. I actually got too much sleep last night. I also want to declare my interest in serving, continuing to serve through June of '22. So there you have it. Thank you. Next, the board will vote on the consent agenda. Board members, are there any items you'd like to pull for discussion? And we can set those aside for discussion and vote at the end of the meeting. Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
No.
Board members, are there any items that you would like to pull from the consent agenda? Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
Second.
Director Scott moves. Director Brum Edwards seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. Is there any board discussion on the consent agenda? Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
The board will now vote on resolutions 6409 through 6416. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg unofficially voting
Yes.
Chair to pass.
yes.
I just want to recognize the work of our Head Start Policy Council and leadership. And it's not, those aren't topics that we spend a lot of time at the board level publicly discussing, but there's so much work that goes into that annual plan, and not to mention the delivery of services across our district, which is just so critical to the readiness of our students. So I want to thank Dr. Emily Glasgow and just the whole team that takes care of our littles.
Thank you, and recognize Robert Cantwell and the rest of the Head Start team. And Director Lowry, did you want to say anything about the Head Start Policy Council?
Our Head Start Policy Council is actually meeting tonight. They tend to have their meetings at the same time we do, but it is an amazing collection of parents who really step up, and some of their folks are the most efficient at meetings and at recruiting and do it with such joy. I got to attend their retreat earlier this fall, and the way they work together is inspirational. So really glad that we have such wonderful parents involved in stewarding those resources for our littles.
I
And Chair
completely
DePass.
agree. I've been very impressed the times I've visited with the Policy Council, how efficient they are, how collaborative they are, how just really staying student focused they are in this really important work. And was also very, just loved the policies, especially the lice management policy. I just thought that was really great. It's no joke. I mean, if you've ever had an outbreak,
Chair
it's great
DePass.
to have a policy in place.
Since-
Superintendent Guerrero?
Thank you. Since we're on the topic of Head Start, for those our listeners out there, just a PSA, a plug for our high quality Head Start program here at PPS. We're looking for clients still, so if you're a family in need of a high quality early ed experience for your 4-year-old, please see us.
Superintendent Guerrero, where would they go?
Well, we'll invite them to give a call to our enrollment office here at PPS or our Head Start office. Please look on our website if you're interested.
916-2000?
Pardon me?
916-2000 or the PPS?
I don't have all the phone numbers memorized, Director Brim Edwards.
916-2000 is a great number to call, and it gets you to everybody you need to speak to here. We're turning now to student and public comment. Before we begin, I'd like to review our guidelines for public comment. First, the board thanks you for taking the time to attend this meeting and providing your comments. Your presence here improves our work, and I hope that, and we do take it into consideration when we're making decisions. Public input generally informs and improves our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, your reflections, and your concerns. Our responsibility in the moment is to actively listen, and to that end, I would ask each of us to give our full attention to the people in front of us by not looking at our phones. The board office may follow up with you on board-related issues raised during public testimony. We request that any complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you email them to publiccomment@pps.net. That's all one word, publiccomment@pps.net. Please make sure when you begin your comment, you clearly state your name and spell your last name, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. You'll hear a sound after 3 minutes, which means it's time to conclude your comments. I want to also add that our public testimony spots have been filled up for weeks. So they've been filled up even before we knew what was on the agenda. So I'm going to add a couple of spots for student testimony this evening, and I'll open up a couple of spots for people on the waiting list that are not students. In an effort to hear from more people, I'll just say personally, I would love to hear from as broad and diverse array of Portland students and families as possible. And so we're doing that so we can open up the spots for people who maybe have not had an opportunity to speak in front of the board. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have anyone signed up for student comment or public comment?
Yes. We have virtually, Terry, can we put up Ramona Sapru Henderson?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the names.
Yes, we have Ramona Sapru Henderson, and she is here virtually. So Terry, if we can put her up.
Hello, welcome.
Hello, my name is Ramona Sapru Henderson, SAPRUHENDERSON, and I'm speaking tonight regarding the climate crisis response policy and the importance of immediate action. Students
Ramona,
today-
excuse me, do you mind if we get some tech help so we can hear you a little better? Looks like it's at 100. Thank you. Yes, it does.
Would you like me to start from the beginning?
Yes, please. And you have 3 minutes from now. Thanks.
My name is Ramona Sapru Henderson, SAPRUHENDERSON, and I'm a student at Grant High School. I'm speaking tonight regarding the climate crisis response policy and the importance of immediate action. Students today face a future plagued by climate disasters and uncertainty. I want to stress the urgency of drafting and putting into action a plan to combat climate change in our district. It is important for the board to take initiative, especially since PPS is responsible not only for our education, but our safety as well. One of the greatest threats to our safety is climate change, and it will only get worse without concrete action. PPS can't solve the whole climate crisis, but it is imperative that they take their part seriously in protecting the future of their students. This type of action is reflected in version 25 of the Climate Crisis Response Policy, which I encourage the board to enact. Modifications, including prolonging the timeline, are a concern to myself and many other students. The UN recently released a statement saying that we only have 11 years until the effects of climate change are irreversible. With this in mind, it's vital to divest from fossil fuel companies and bring our emissions in the district to net zero as soon as possible. Students in PPS have contributed greatly to the fight for action, but our needs have not yet been met. Major decisions about our future are being made by people who may not face the severity of the consequences of climate change. I strongly encourage you to think about what lies ahead in the coming years and the thousands of students you're making decisions for. Creating a policy is not going to guarantee success. This comes with commitment and accountability. Don't let this policy sit on the shelf. We want to see action and progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Xander Levine.
We can.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Xander Levine, XANDERLEVINE. Good to see you again. Good to be back in person. Tonight I'll be speaking on two topics. Both of them fall under the general umbrella of social and emotional well-being. I'd preface this by saying that I understand you as a board don't have direct a direct effect on the union contract, and it's left to the PBS bargaining team. Therefore, my comments tonight on this is more for the people in this room and watching this at home. As a student, I feel stressed. I'm tired. However, I'm not looking for less classroom time. I want to be in school 5 days a week in person. Going back online for async catch-up time is a bad idea and will only further the damage done that online school caused. School is a time where students can make friendships, learn new skills, make positive strides towards social and emotional well-being, escape a challenge they're facing at home, or even the time they can get a meal to eat. This dramatically changes if we significantly reduce classroom hours. Data has already shown that the achievement rates have dropped significantly due to online school, and by no means do I think that this is the answer to a problem that online school caused. Something that has been absent this year is regular flex time. Normally, we have 2 hours of flex a week to meet with teachers, make up work, and catch up on missing assignments. This has been reduced this year to only 2 hours a month. Tomorrow is the first time we have flex since the last flex, which was like November 1st. Bringing back more flex time is an easy way to address student stress, provide us with more breathing room, and time to catch up on work we're behind on. I support reasonable solutions to address student and teacher burnout. I do not support ridiculous solutions, such as taking away a day of school. With that, I'll transition to my next topic, school dances. An internal admin portal memo was sent out on December 2nd, and it says, school dances are not prohibited due to the particular challenge of social distancing. This is laughable. This is ridiculous. There is minimal social distancing inside school to begin with. During lunch, in the hallways, at extracurriculars, there isn't space to social distance. Volleyball and basketball games in my school gym take place with 400 attendees packed in the stands, watching unmasked players compete. That doesn't seem to be an issue. At 8th grade back to school night with 300 parents and students in the gym to watch informational presentations didn't seem to be an issue. A full-on theater production with audience members took place just last week in the auditorium. During passing periods, 1,600 kids stand shoulder to shoulder in the hallways. These events have not seen mass COVID outbreaks. Those events are keeping students engaged and excited about school. Football games this past fall were more exciting than they ever have been because they provided us with a social outlet and setting to connect with others. Sporting events and other extracurriculars have saved my mental health this year. These mass gatherings have also proven to be safe. We simply have not seen that they're a COVID hazard. Even public health officials say that large gatherings with masks and vaccines are safe. At every single one of those events besides school, vaccines were required. You must change the rule about school dances and allow them to happen. I want you to work with PPS staff to change these rules immediately. I want to have a winter formal and a prom. We missed the chance with homecoming. Every other school district on the West Coast had one, and we were not. Please stop the hypocrisy and let us have a school dance.
Thank you.
We have Cody Dickinson.
Cody?
Okay. How about Max Dickinson? Annika Witt.
Team. Yeah. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, my name is Annika Reddy-Witt. I'm a fifth, R-E-D-D-Y-W-I-T-T. I'm a fifth grader at Bridger, and I'm a biracial kid of color. This is not my first time coming to a board meeting like this. I came with my family when I was in second grade because PPS hadn't planned for enough classroom space at our school. I would like to go to Kellogg next year for middle school. The Kellogg School program was created for DLI students, and it's really important for me because I really want to keep learning Spanish in a system that was meant for it. It's a new aspect of knowledge in my life and supports the culture of my Latinx classmates. And it will help make up for the challenges that Bridger has been faced with over the years. It was really hard having to have 2 classrooms working in a gym separated by a sheet, or having PE outside in the heat and rain because we had no gym, and just having no room ever. I remember when students who needed extra assistance had to work in the hallway, or when we had art on a cart because we didn't have enough room for an art classroom. It was really challenging, and so the promise of having a brand new school that was meant for us helped make up for it. I really don't want the Bridger community to be torn apart. We have a very strong, tight-knit community where we all know each other and are all almost like family. I'm friendly with everyone across all our classes. We've formed bonds, we can laugh and joke, and we all share memories. Like that one time in kindergarten where we threw a party for my teacher. Our families take care of each other. During the height of the pandemic, a bunch of parents organized to drop off food for families that needed them. Here's my request for you. I would like for our students who are graduating to middle school to go to Kellogg. It was a promise that was made for us, and it's something I feel very strongly about. I would like the K-5 Spanish strands to stay together. It seems like a strange and challenging idea to break them apart and send them to different schools. I would also like to keep some part of our school the same at Bridger. I prefer if we don't completely change the school. Our community is strong, and it seems like an overcomplicated answer to completely change it. I've had enough of PPS messing with our school to the extreme. It's too much. I understand that we need some change, but that change should make things better for all our students, not worse. Please let us know how you'll respond to these requests. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eddie Meir. Ada Candle.
I'd like to give my time to someone else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Danny Cage.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So firstly, I would like to just thank all of our students in here. I would also like to give a special shout out to Ada Crendel, who has made national news, national and local news for the work that they've done with Youth versus ODOT, along with the work that they've done with stopping ODOT from tearing down Harriet Tubman Middle School. So I'll just start it off by that. I don't have anything prepared with me today. I was on the waiting list. But this climate crisis response policy is very important. I know that there are challenges with budgeting. I know that there are challenges with enacting this policy. That being said, we need to be bold and we need to be brave. We do not have a long time until our planet is devastated by what has happened. We can't have the ability to wait to create a policy that doesn't serve everyone. I don't have anything. But my plea is that we hear from our students today and we recognize what is happening in the room. And for our fellow policy committee members, we're all meeting tomorrow, to intake that and really rethink those draft revisions. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw?
Yes. Gina Valencia.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Gina Valencia, G as in George, I-N-A, V-A-L-E-N-C-I-A. I'm a parent of 2 kids enrolled in Portland Public Schools dual immersion program. One attends Bridger and the other one transitioned from Bridger is attending Kellogg Middle School. I appreciate the board, Dr. Proctor, and the staff intention in delivering better results for our diverse students in Southeast. I know you received concerning data regarding the gaps in achievement. What I do not understand is why this process has done so little to engage the families who seem to be the target to benefit the most from your intentions. Sorry, I can't do foggy glasses. There's an evident disconnect between intentions and process. And I reach to say, there's a big disconnect between intentions and results. I also agree with Dr. Proctor and her assessment that the dual immersion programs are outstanding and proven ways to help close the achievement gap. It is not clear to me or other parents why the current proposals will completely dismantle the community developed in Kellogg that is already nurturing whole community of learners who are bilingual, with bilingual staff and educators and programming, to only have to rebuild it again somewhere else. This is the one thing that isn't broken. Why dismantle it? At last PPS board meeting, Superintendent Guerrero said that it's not about the physical buildings, but the programming in the schools what really matters. I agree. At Bridger, the most overcrowded and outdated school in the district, a powerful community has grown over the last 12 years or more. This community comes together to help families have food on their table or provide educational opportunities through parent volunteers. Why dismantle the strengths of this school community? Why not to hold on to some part of this community infrastructure that is already in place? We need to address the immediate problems that we have of overcrowding in the neighborhood program today with some additional support this and next school year. And to take more time to engage the families we want to help the most. Harrison Park, for example, has some of Southeast's highest populations of Black students, as well as Vestal, Lent, and Bridger. How will we engage these families? Do they want to move over the region? Is that feasible for them? Do they want to cross the area's largest arteries to go to school? Please don't split the dual immersion program into strands of different schools. That will be devastating for students and for families. Please keep the beautiful program at Kellogg consistent. It's already working, I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Rosen.
You get applause and you haven't even said anything yet.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
Clearly a former board member.
Hi, I'm Mike Rosen, R-O-S-E-N, and I'm a member of the PPS Climate Justice Committee and their steering committee. I have been testifying to Portland Public Schools Board for almost 25 years now, and tonight's testimony is the most important. My message is simple. After 25 drafts, the board needs to move on and refer the current climate crisis response policy to formal public notice and comment. It's taken 2 years to get to this point, and the public input has been thorough and extraordinary. Prior to submission of the draft policy to PPS, 30 community-based organizations were solicited for comments, and 20 responded. After revision within the policy committee in October, PPS initiated a community engagement process reaching out to students, parents, and community groups. We feel it's necessary to review some of the community feedback because at the last board policy committee meeting, it was misrepresented by staff. Of 73 comments received from the Community Engagement Climate Survey, 28 asked that the policy continues to address resiliency supports for the community, particularly the BIPOC community, considering that climate change has disproportionate impacts to communities of color. The PPS Youth Advisory Group had this to say: kids love the range of issues. However, most students were worried by the non-committal and vague language. Another thing students felt was vital with the policy is transparency in its implementation and progress. The Coalition of Communities of Color, which represents 18 separate BIPOC-based organizations, suggested that PPS could play an essential role in emergency response by becoming an energy island that can stay powered during electrical outages to provide community support during climate disasters, such as heating and cooling centers during extreme cold and heat events and charging stations during long electrical outages. The CCC also said that PPS needs to be careful about using net zero goals because although these goals sound positive, they can open the door to false climate solutions like excessive carbon offset programs that are not verifiable and do not decrease community exposure to air pollution from burning fossil fuels. The community has spoken clearly. The policy needs to stay specific, timely, and robust. Version 25 does this, and the proposed staff rollbacks undermine 2 years of hard work. The community looks to the board for leadership and asks for the adoption of a strong climate crisis response policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane, come out.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Jane Comalt, Comeault. I'm here as a PPS parent. And tonight I want to encourage the board to take the opportunity to lead on climate justice and climate action by moving forward with version 25 of the Climate Crisis Response Policy, including accountability measures for its implementation to ensure its long-term success. As I think back to other policy work on sustainability and climate change, I noticed some shortcomings, especially in implementation. For example, the Resource Conservation Policy 3.30.080. This policy was adopted in 1992 and amended in 2002, and in 29 years, I understand that an administrative directive was never written. Substantively, the policy was appropriate for the times, but decades later, it lacks the content necessary to meet today's climate and sustainability challenges. It's weak and dated and still has yet to be fully implemented. Over the years, the board has heard students and others call for action on topics within its scope, but since the policy lacks teeth and implementation, nothing has really changed. Now, let's consider PPS's Climate Literacy Resolution 5272. It was passed in 2016, but for 2 years, not much changed until students demanded district action. I applaud and acknowledge progress since then, including the creation of a Climate Justice Programs Manager position, but several items languish, such as this operational portion of the resolution. And I quote, Portland Public Schools recognize that our schools must play a leadership role in modeling for students climate and environmentally friendly practices when it comes to building design, energy use, including the use of solar panels, land use, waste disposal, and compost and recycling. Now, certainly PPS staff has made progress in these areas, but not at the rate and scale needed to face the climate emergency, which leads us back to the Climate Crisis Response Policy. Version 25 calls for the creation of a community committee, including students and a majority of members who identify as people of color, to monitor effective implementation, transparency, and tracking of progress, which I wholeheartedly applaud. Meeting at least quarterly and reporting annually, this is the level of accountability that the PPS community expects and deserves, and it will provide a structure to ensure the successful implementation of the policy. The process in developing the CCRP, which I've been closely involved with since the beginning, has been congenial, collaborative, and productive. Lately, and I'm not sure why, it's felt political. Let's keep it constructive and moving forward. PPS has a proud history of working on climate change and climate justice, and version 25 of the CCRP will help position PPS for success in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Higgs.
Hello, my name is Amy Higgs, Higgs. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Executive Director of the Eco School Network. Thank you all for your work on the Climate Crisis Response Policy. I have here with me a few beautiful posters that Roosevelt's Sheltered Environmental Science class for English language learners asked me to share with you, including some in Spanish talking about the climate impacts in Guatemala and El Salvador, where the students come from. I'm here representing 138 parent leaders in the Eco School Network and several hundred student green team members from 53 PPS schools, a third of which are Title I schools. 1/3 of our parent leaders and 45% of our PPS students are people of color. On behalf of this group, I urge you to pass a robust version of the climate crisis response policy. At last week's policy meeting, we were surprised and disappointed by the proposed streamlining of the policy and the apparent board support for this change. Staff may feel overwhelmed by the scope of the policy. Climate justice touches so many areas of district life. Version 25 of the policy is 4 pages long, and the streamlined version is just 1.5 pages. In contrast, the PPS policy on animals in the classroom is 6 pages long. Instead of removing this policy substance, let's boost support and funding so staff can carry it out. I appreciate the staff matrix addressing feasibility and impacts for each item and the edits made to version 25 with this in mind. But the streamlined version 24 omits all the measurable outcomes that make the policy strong. As I read just a few of the things omitted, let's ask ourselves, are these nitty-gritty details or critical goals? They include best practices for environmentally preferable purchasing, increasing energy efficiency and minimizing use of fossil fuels, health and safety standards for a climate-safe work environment, transitioning to low-emissions fuels and electric vehicles, working with students and frontline communities on plans to stay safe during climate impacts, and increasing staff capacity to respond to climate crises. I'm here representing my constituency to say that these outcomes are essential. Please include these and other actionable items in version 25. It's not an overly detailed policy. It's just a big policy because it's a big problem. In closing, let's remind ourselves that this is the climate crisis response policy. A crisis response isn't just about big picture values. It should clearly say what the response will be. We urge you to pass the most ambitious version possible of this policy. Our students, and especially our frontline community students, deserve strong leadership from the board. To maintain hope, our students need to see PPS taking ambitious action to safeguard their future. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Maxine Dexter. Maxine Dexter.
It doesn't look like she's
Yes.
here.
Dylan Plummer, who's virtual, so I'm moving him over now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Chair DePass, Vice Chair Scott, and members of the Portland Public School Board, thank you for providing this opportunity for testimony. My name is Dylan Plummer, Plummer. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a senior campaign representative with the Sierra Club working across Oregon and Washington. On behalf of the Sierra Club's members and supporters in the Portland Public School District and the 60,000 members and supporters we have across Oregon, I'm testifying to urge the Portland Public School Board to take necessary steps to address the climate crisis and ensure our schools are safe, healthy, and resilient spaces for children to learn and grow. After another summer of historic wildfire, drought, and deadly heat waves, and in light of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's most dire report yet about the state of the climate crisis, now is a time for elected officials like yourselves at all levels of government to pass concrete policies to reduce climate pollution and to help transition our state to 100% renewable energy. Specifically, I hope that Portland Public Schools will continue its critical leadership role in the climate movement by passing a climate crisis response policy that reflects the urgency of this crisis, including key provisions that are under consideration to cut from the proposed draft, version 25. PPS plays a crucial role in statewide action and has an opportunity to lead the state while following in the footsteps of other progressive school districts in the Pacific Northwest, such as the Seattle School District, which recently passed a similar climate policy. The PPS Policy Committee's most recent draft plan includes many critical actions that we support, including decarbonizing school buildings and transportation by phasing out fossil fuel use, reducing food waste, and increasing community resilience with a focus on frontline communities. However, I urge the committee and all PPS board members to ensure the final policy includes the following key community priorities. committing to work with frontline communities on resiliency efforts, switching to an all-electric fleet by 2035, divesting from fossil fuel companies, making PPS carbon neutral by at least 2040 instead of 2050 without offsets, using carbon neutral purchasing practices, and including concrete mechanisms to measure progress the district is or is not making to achieve net zero goals. The Sierra Club is particularly concerned that the Board Policy Committee has taken steps backwards in this process, despite significant input by the public. Now is not the time to sit on the sidelines. It is critical for the near-term well-being of all Portlanders, as well as the long-term well-being of students in Portland and across the state, that we take an all-hands-on-deck approach to addressing this crisis. This is particularly critical for frontline communities, BIPOC and low-income communities, many of whom are directly affected by PPS policy decisions. Again, I urge you to reconsider recent amendments to the draft proposal and pass the strongest version possible of the CCRP to meet the urgency of the climate crisis in which we find ourselves. Finally, I'd like to direct your attention to the public letter submitted earlier this evening in support for Bold Climate Action, signed on by 8 organizations working in Portland and across the state, including the Sierra Club. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
From the waiting list, we have Carrie Babin. How about Anna Cox?
Is Anna in attendance? Ms. Bradshaw, are these from the waiting list?
Yes.
Okay.
Chris Summers. Richard Donan. Amy Joffrey. Do you want me to keep going down the list? Share to pass?
Why don't you try to read a few more? Yes, please.
Okay. Carlos Baca. Isabel Jonan. Rachel Chang. Katie Lil Joan.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you for having us all tonight. My name is Katie Liljeholm, Liljehol, M as in mother. I'm an Arleta parent. So I'd like to start just by telling you a little bit about Arleta. We had some recent difficulties with a particularly racist school administration that the student body and the parents had to work very hard to get removed. It ultimately took a vote of no confidence from our teachers.
Excuse me.
Yes, yes.
May I just interrupt you and ask
Yeah.
if this is a personnel matter?
No, this is about the redistricting proposals.
Thank you.
So we've worked really hard on community building really recently, despite having very few resources and support for that to happen. Our kids have been, as you are well aware, through a pandemic where they lost all of their community connections for a year and a half. It is therefore really disappointing and a slap in the face of our parents that you are considering a proposal that would close our school and replace it with a different school. My understanding of the process is that initially you charged some of your employees and a coalition of parents to balance enrollment at Lane Middle School and to turn Harrison Park School into a K-5 and a middle school. When Arleta did that, you had enough buildings for everyone. When you're trying to do that at Harrison Park, you do not, which means you need to displace Creative Science School, and in turn, you're displacing a neighborhood school, replacing it with Creative Science School. These proposals affect, my understanding is, 20 schools in Southeast Portland. That's a quarter of Portland public schools, making significant student body changes at a time when you should be community building. I've heard a lot of numbers about budgets and enrollment. I have heard very little about the impact educationally and socio-emotionally on the children when you disrupt their communities right after a traumatic event. This process has been poorly informed by trauma-informed education and has been poorly addressed in terms of the mental health of our students and community building. I'm really urging you to consider a different way of balancing enrollments and to set caps that would limit the number of students that get changed or the percentages of students that get shifted from building to building. This is a time when we need to make stable supports for our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Chair to pass. We're going to, if it's okay with you, go back to Ada Crandall. I called her earlier. She's on the list.
I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
Yes. If it's okay with you, I'd like to go back to Ada Crandall. She was on the list, and she has asked if she could go.
Sure, thank you. And that'll be our final testimony.
Yes.
Hello, board members. My name is Ada Crandall, Crandall. I am a sophomore at Grant High School, and I'm an organizer with Sunrise Movement PDX, which is the Portland chapter of Sunrise, which is a youth climate organization fighting to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. I'd like to echo the comments of all of the other advocates here tonight, urging you to pass version 25 of the Climate Crisis Response Plan. We are running out of time to stop the climate crisis. We do not have time to wait for more drafts of this policy. I'm really sick of PPS stalling on this. We need action now, and we need the urgency of your actions to match the urgency of this crisis. There are so many people here today. There are so many young people here who are urging you to do these same things and to fight for climate justice. A few months ago, thousands of PPS students walked out of school and marched downtown to demand climate action from our leaders. Sometimes when we think of our leaders, we think of people like the mayor and the governor and the national government, but you as school board members are also part of that leadership, and you also need to be accountable to taking action on climate. I really believe that climate action starts in our schools with educating our students and showing our students what the world could be if we did take the necessary action. As a young climate advocate, I'm pretty sick of viewing PPS as the opposition. I would like to see you as an ally in this fight, and I would like to be able to work with the school board members to create this better world that I know we all want to see. I really want to believe that all of you want to fight for our futures and want to fight to make the lives of our students better. Could I get a show of hands, honestly, from the board members if you think that climate justice is something that you value and something that you want to take action on? Okay, can everybody see this? They say they care about climate justice. Okay, so are we going to hold them accountable to it? Yes, we are going to hold them accountable, and we are going to urge you to pass version 25 of the Climate Crisis Response Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And we love Sunrise PDX, by the way. Thank you. Okay. Appreciate all of you that came here tonight to share your comments. Please feel free to connect with our senior board manager, Roseanne Powell, if you have anything specifically you'd like to add or follow up with, or you've got a written testimony that you need to have turned in. And please, we're welcome. We see you. We see a lot of yellow. We see some beautiful colors and some nice faces, and appreciate you being here. We're going to move on to our business now. Student representatives report, are you prepared? Would you like to share your report?
Yes. And actually, before everyone leaves, I wanted to dedicate my report this evening to all of you, to the students present advocating for bold and immediate action on the climate crisis response policy. Students raising this issue should be a wake-up call to take action. Many adults won't experience the effect of their decisions that they are making currently. I feel like we are seeing the outsized response from students compared to adults for this very reason. In the past 3 years, I have never seen this large of a turnout from students for any board matter. Many challenges have been presented in this process. It is time for us to tackle these problems with creative, out-of-the-box solutions that PPS prides itself on. In the past 3 years also, on the policy committee, this is the single policy that I have spent the most committee time and also personal time on. I appreciate the thoroughness of this policy, but at some point we continue to rehash the same questions. Our students and future students can't wait any longer. Lastly, I'm concerned with the streamlining process that is reducing our commitment to students' wellness, safety, and education surrounding the climate crisis. It is my responsibility to lift up student voice to this board and the district. To that end, this policy needs to be robust in order to address this robust crisis. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Student Representative Weinberg. That was amazing. We're going to go to conference and committee reports, and if we could just start at the left and kind of move down, starting with Director Constam.
We had our audit committee meeting, and it is, and I have a mask on. Basically, all I have to report from the audit committee is that we are awaiting the final report on the ACH audit that the district has concluded, but we haven't seen the final report yet. And then we had a really good conversation about our scope of work for the upcoming year. So we have 2 audits that were approved with last year's slate that still have not, that are about to commence. One is on student activity funds, and I asked our student representatives on the audit committee to be our help be our primary liaisons with staff on looking at that issue. And then the other that was already approved was on hardship transfers. So those are the next 2 audits coming up. And then we also agreed to recommend to the board that the next audit be around services for our English language learners in the district. So we're going to leave it at that. That's a full slate of work for probably the next year for our audit staff. And thanks to everybody on the board for making the time to meet with our internal auditor to provide your perspectives and opinions. And we still have a running list of other things that we're interested in that we want to take on in the future.
Thank you. And I know our senior auditor is very interested in sourcing ideas from us. So if you have a wild hair or an idea, something that you want to see the ins and outs of, she's the person to contact. That would be Janice Hansen.
Chair DePaus, I also wanted to mention, we discussed in the audit committee that we do have a follow-up meeting this week with the Secretary of State's office on the audit that they conducted of PPS, and hopefully we're just about concluded on that. They have provided their last follow-up report, and staff has provided information in response to some still open questions. So I think after our meeting this week, likely that process will be concluded.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Director Hollins, Facilities and Operations.
Yes. Am I on? Okay, there we go. So we had our Facilities and Operations Committee meeting. We went over the ADA transition plan. We probably took a little bit more time than we should have had. We should have did a little bit longer on that. We sent that back to get reworked or reworded. And so Director Constam had expressed interest in doing that, the rewording of the 88 transition plan. We also had a report from Portland Parks and Recs in a governmental agreement. It sounds like the athletic facilities piece kind of got worked out. Looked like they were in agreement with a lot of the things that they asked for from the park. So They split up the two. One is operations, and then one is the actual land pieces. So that seems like that's going pretty well. And then we had a conversation about the West Sylvan complex, the turf field, artificial turf fields. Probably should have more time with that as well. There's a lot of issues around that. We did get a report from staff around that as well. So that was the Facilities and Operations Committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have a report, Director Brim Edwards, on the Policy Committee?
I do. We have a committee meeting tomorrow from 4 to 6. And we're continuing work on some policies that we had before us at the last meeting. Notably, and this will, I anticipate, be coming to the board shortly, some revisions to the student representative and district student council policy. We're considering a narrower version of changes right now so that the board has a chance to work through the policymaking process, some changes relating to the election of the student representative. And we're doing that so that we hopefully have all that work done before the election process starts, because there's nothing worse than changing the election process or making adjustments in the middle of a process, because it raises questions about the fairness. So hopefully that will be coming out of committee tomorrow. In addition, as you just heard, we've had the 21-22 Policy Committee has had several meetings where we've discussed the climate response policy. And we had a base policy that was handed off to us from the 2021 Policy Committee. And then we had, as was mentioned tonight, some community engagement. I think we have a strong policy that is responsive to and hopefully will put PPS in a position to hit our target by 2040. And I really want to thank the staff who have worked on this and supported the process. And people may be wondering tonight why it's not out of committee yet. There have been, this is a policy, was noted that it's a big policy, and there are a lot of different points of view. Climate science is evolving rapidly, and how institutions respond to it. And as the chair, I felt it was important to, since we had a new committee, have everybody have an opportunity to ask questions, discuss some of the proposals, and that's true of staff as well. And I also think there comes a point in time that perfect becomes the enemy of good.
The good.
I was trying to remember, make sure I had that right. And so I do anticipate that we'll be moving it out, and I think in what currently it is in version 25 format, I think we're going to end up with the strong policy, and that there will not be an opportunity for the community to weigh in again, because of course our policymaking process allows that any, once we have a first reading and introduction, that there'll be a public comment period before the board adopts the final version. But I am confident that PPS is going to have a strong and bold response, and staff has already done a lot of work to set us up to be en route to that. So
and I just want to say that a lot of what people said tonight is going to be in the policy. Some specific things people highlighted are things we've been talking about retaining in the policy, and some of the things that folks mentioned that might be coming out of the policy will be in an AD or an implementation plan. So I think that's part of the conversation, is where do some of these really important pieces belong so that we do this well. And like the speaker who talked about, these policies that are out of date now and aren't really working for us, how do we make sure we craft a policy that really does address this well and has all those pieces? And I know Director Brim Edwards, you've been working really hard to help us have that conversation about what belongs in policy and what belongs in each of these different buckets so that we can be successful. And actually, what's more important than the policy is actually doing this work and getting it done so that our kids do have a safe climate and are, safe in schools.
Can I ask you?
Yes,
Can I ask you a
I love that the committee reports is turning into yes.
Well, I think
go-
'cause I don't
go
think there's
ahead.
any other opportunity tonight, because I actually, and I wish the folks who had testified had stuck around for this conversation so they could actually, because I'll be honest, I'm a little bit confused because all the emails I get in the testimony tonight, I'm a very big fan of concrete language and concrete speaking, and I keep hearing people say weakening the policy, doing this, but we are just talking about whether these provisions stay in the policy or go into administrative directive, right? Am I correct that we're not actually?
The conversation. I mean, for the board. So if we're going to stay in our lane, our lane is the policy, and so anything that would be an administrative directive, that's clearly an implementing piece is the superintendent's purview, so we've had a discussion what belongs in these both places, but the board can't put something in administrative directive because that's not our role. So I think policymaking is there's an art to it and a science, and sometimes we put more detail in policy. And other ones we put less detail. And an example of one that we put more detail in was the professional conduct policy. So the board spent almost a year on it. It was something that was really important. And we put more meat on the bones of that policy than we did in other ones. So I think we're getting to a point, but it's clearly not the board's role to say this is going to be an administrative directive. And there's been, we had a conversation about, there was a document that said, take these items out of the policy that had been under consideration for a while, take these items out of the policy and we'll put them in the administrative directive, and that was a staff document. But again, the board can't say, we're going to take this out and we're going to put an administrative directive because that's not our role.
Sure. No, and that's
So I'm trying to-
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think what worries me a little is the community seems to be under the impression that, because I see it all as a whole and a holistic, like we're working together, that if the board says this is what the policy is going to be and the district and superintendent and staff say and this is what we're going to put in the administrative directive, that will be PPS's climate policy. But I'm hearing from the community this concern that if it's not in the policy, somehow we're not going to do it. And what I find interesting is that the community, maybe I should just be positive, they seem to trust the board to follow through on things more than the district, and yet we know for a fact that as you just said, what's the most important thing is the follow through, and I actually feel like the district is fully committed to working on these things and making sure they get done. And so again, getting back to what you just said, which is really important, our role is to establish policy and also establish the goals. So I do think that if there are going to be very specific goals that the board wants to see, potentially those should be in policy or some other adopted by resolution. And then again, it's the district's job to follow through and do that. I think we need a real public education campaign, though, for folks to understand that this is not a weakening of the policy. It's actually good governance. And I can make a pretty strong argument that actually having too much in policy will make the actual policy and implementation worse than giving the district the flexibility to achieve the goals, which I think is what the community wants, and I think that's unanimous up here as well. Certainly, I'll speak for myself. I want to see those same things that the folks who testified here today. But again, how we get there is going to be important. And I am also worried that, frankly, some of our community members, including former board members, may be fomenting a little bit of this, this sense that we're walking back from something. And I guess what I'm really
Andrew,
interested in, and maybe the policy committee.
If I can maybe share.
Well, yes. Let me just finish real quick. Okay. I'd be interested if it's the policy committee or some other way of communicating out a little bit more clearly. I mean, maybe this is a civics lesson in terms of good governance that we need to be engaging in, because it doesn't feel like it's really about the outcomes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of this is you've had two committees, and what the community is reacting to, I believe, is that there was work, and I wasn't part of the smaller work group in the last policy group, but there was a policy developed, and then it went out to community engagement, and that came back, and there's now a proposal to remove significant portions of it. And so I think that is what people are reacting to. And so, and I will say in the committee, we have done some things where, as an example, having standardized recycling bins. So, like, I think it's a great idea, but should it be in policy? We made a decision to take that out. So we've had these discussions, but like literally in some cases, like we're walking through each individual issue. So we have new members of the committee. And so we've been walking through each individual committee. But what the community's reaction is like, and I don't feel like as the committee chair, I can say if we take something out, like this is for sure going to be in the AD because that's not our role.
No, but it is just
Can I,
yeah. And actually,
do you mind
I
if we
kind of
just-
wanted to ask Jackson a similar question. Does he feel like students have a good sense of the conversation that's happening right now? Because I didn't actually hear that from their testimony, a real understanding of that.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to downplay, I guess, the response. I don't want to downplay the response. I do think there was an adequate response for, like, what is broad knowledge? Like, anything, like, taking something out of a document that we're holding as our response to the climate crisis looks bad. I mean, it looks bad, right? So I think we need to change the narrative of we're moving it somewhere else. It's still part of our plan. It's going to be a part of our implementation plan or AD. Hopefully, I think that's the one caveat. Hopefully it will be in there. So I hope that answers your question, I guess. I do think it's an adequate response, though. I think seeing that being taken out of our response is not great.
I'm going to kind of move us along because we have a long agenda, and I'm looking at the time, and we're actually ahead of where we should be. This is a topic that's dear to my heart as well, and I think that the good thing is that the community and the board can agree that we want to see some strong response to climate crisis, and I think that's good, and I think the conversations are good, and we're going to move on. And I'd also like to say we'd take a 5-minute break at 7:30, just to get everybody a stretch break, or grab another Christmas cookie break, or whatever you need. But let's move on. And sorry, thank you for the conversation. And we're going to move down the line. I was going to ask you before you spoke if you just wanted to say something tonight because you've been so quiet.
I'll talk later.
As opposed to Director Green, who doesn't need a lot of prompting. Director Lowry.
I got nothing.
Director Green, Charter School Alternative and Charter.
Absolutely. We had we had some dialogue, some talking. We've just been having a great time going through things, looking at stuff, and we've got some amazing, absolutely amazing programs running in our schools. And I'm excited for in January to come back so that I can go out to begin the actual site visits. We postponed our meeting for our regularly scheduled meeting for this month. So that we could give our staff, and we have an amazing team. I want to publicly, because I don't get to say it often, but I want to publicly acknowledge the rest of the team that's not here, Dr. Naberto and Karina and what's her name? Erica Shaves. Just some amazing people who are really working hard to really make sure that we're doing what's best for all the kids in our program, even those that don't go to our traditional schools. And so our next meeting will be in January. We're going to pick back up, and we're gonna take off. We got a lot of stuff that we're going to be bringing forth. So stay tuned, because it's going to get real exciting.
Excellent. We look forward to that. Director Brum-Edwards.
Yeah, I was going to wrap up my report by just also thanking the Portland Association to Teachers for giving elected leaders, staff members, an opportunity to be teacher for the day. And I want to personally thank Ms. Houth who is a 4th, 5th grade teacher at Whitman, for welcoming me to her classroom today. It was amazing, and we have great staff on all our classrooms, and I left the day exhausted, watching a really skilled master teacher lead her students through a whole day of activities. So I just want to recognize and thank our teachers, and I know that Director Lowry participated in as well. And Director Scott.
And I was scheduled to today, and I didn't get the memo. So I'm trying to schedule a follow-up at one of the Zone 2 schools. Did get a chance to go to Roosevelt in your territory, where you're highly regarded. And I understand you have a family member there, and you have ties to the basketball. Like, I heard a lot of green. I was only there an hour and a half or so. And anyway, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. I know you're anxious to get onto your long-range facility report, but just to give everyone a stretch break for about 5 minutes, please. So our next order of business is we will vote to accept the district's long-range facilities plan for 2021 to 2031. This plan was developed in November in the November 17th Facilities and Operations Committee. Do I have a second? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit off script, because we do have just a moment, please. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution?
I make a motion. I make a motion.
A motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6421, acceptance of the long-range facility plan.
Nobody's going to second?
Second.
Okay, because I'll second it too.
But I believe, I'm just a little bit confused on the order of operations, because we do have staff available, and I don't know if we have a staff report.
We got the motion on the table, so
We've got the motion on the table.
Superintendent going to introduce the item?
So I heard Director Green moved, or did you second?
I moved and seconded,
That's-
but I think
that's
Gary
what-
ended up
Okay.
doing the second, so I'll let him do the second. I made the move.
Okay.
Second? No.
You know, your initials are opposite of each other, so
It works.
it really got me confused.
Chair to pass, we have Chief Operating Officer Dan Young here, if you'd like to hear further.
I
heard that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm joined by John Lyons, Senior Program Manager of Real Estate and Planning. We were just going to say a couple quick words about the long-range facilities plan, and then we will allow you to move on. And just a couple quick notes. As you may recall, it was the October 27th Facility and Operations Committee meeting where we reviewed the multi-year process and the robust stakeholder and community engagement process that has informed the plan that is before you tonight. And then the November 9th work session where we dove into outcome details and obtained feedback that have been incorporated into the plan as well. So tonight we're just going to quickly do a quick refresh on some high points of the plan, and also take a quick pause to just thank a few of the many stakeholders who have helped shape this effort.
Thank you, Dan. So just a reminder, the long-range facility plan is intended to guide future capital improvements within the context of educational program vision, enrollment and capacity, and facility condition. These considerations are guided by our strategic vision established by the district and informed by input from the broader district community. On that score, we owe a great deal of thanks to the many people for helping shape this document. Too many to name here, indeed, but I would like to take a moment to thank the students who co-created this work with us, either by participating in dialogue sessions, by facilitating meetings, or creating the beautiful artwork that you see in the document. So these students are Lily Angslinger, Mabel Gale, Eleanor Haugo, Yael Horowitz, Cora Johnston, Evie Kakuska, Sabine Kenny, Matthew Lee, Julia Lim, Isaiah Lido, Max Mahira, Sage Margello, Parker Myris, Kelsey Nita, Elisa Peltier, Lana Pierce, Delphina Seeger, Carmela Thomas, Valeria Volmar Rendon, Elia Walters, Philip Vyman, Jackson Weinberg, and Olivia Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Included in your packets tonight is the long-range facilities plan. A couple very quick reminders. This is a living document. Because PPS's programs, enrollment, and facility condition change over time, so will this document. And also, this document is informational. The long-range facilities plan does not make any specific commitments. Rather, it provides a framework to be refined and tested prior to future capital decisions. And with that, we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Board members, do we have any questions or comments?
I just wanted to start with my appreciation for a really honestly student-centered process. I appreciated starting with students with the dialogues and then having a student-centered meeting space every single meeting, incorporating our student interns holistically into this process. I think it really is a model for how we can center student voice in all of our work.
Thank you.
I think that was really evident to our committee when we had the presentation and we walked through this with staff, and the student representatives were leading that process and clearly had been really deeply engaged. So kudos on that, and also just the broader engagement process was really good on this.
So I had a question, but also I'm going to start with just recognition that I think this is a great foundation for us to be making facilities decisions, and hopefully we'll be continuing to move through our bond program and providing upgrades. So, there's a wealth of information in here, and really appreciate it. I just want to maybe touch a little bit on the living document concept, because I think that's absolutely essential. However, being somebody who has a paper copy, how will, as there's iterations or new information that comes in, will it be like the second edition or the third edition? How will we know how it's evolving? So if tonight we have a snapshot in time of information, say in 2 years from now, there's some new information or something else that happens and we evolve it, does that come back to the board, or do we get an addendum or an appendix, or share how we know what new life is occurring in a living document?
It's a great question. So what we'll need to do is, for instance, with our enrollment forecast, those are going to be issued every spring, for example. So we'll want to update that information around that time. So that information will infuse the entire document. What we'd be happy to do is revise the document with the new information and then just produce a summary of saying this is what's changed based on this data points. So
great. Perfect.
If that works.
Director Scott?
Thanks. I just want to say thanks to staff for this. It's one of the overlooked, it's a great plan. I really appreciate it. It's very detailed, and I think lays out a really nice game plan moving forward. I think it's also often unremarked that not every government has a long-range facilities plan. The city of Portland does not have a robust long-range facilities plan, much to my professional embarrassment. Metro does not have a long-range facilities plan. And I think sometimes, I don't want to talk about it. Thank you, Chair Lowry. But I think it's worth saying that, we have really old buildings, right? And they're really run down, and we often hear that. That doesn't mean we don't have a plan in place. It doesn't mean we're not following and trying to dig out, because none of us were around 30, 40 years ago when they were disinvesting, in our infrastructure. And looking at the bond program that has, 2012, 2017, 2020, and then, we're going to go back out in 24. That is the way that a government, any government, school district or not, actually turns that around and actually invests in the future and in future generations. And so this is just a continuation of work that was happening long before I got to the board. I'm just happy to be here to sort of say, yep, keep going, and let's just keep doing this. And I'm just really proud of the district for doing that. And I hope we start getting a little bit more credit, because I think it often gets overlooked.
Thank you. And some of us were around 30 or 40 years ago, but I'm not going to name names.
You're not on the board when they were making the disinvestment.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was in high school 40 years ago. I want to also appreciate the staff and that impressive list of students that you just read off. I'm also really happy I work for the city and have worked for the city off and on for a long time, and there is no long-range facilities plan. So our real estate and land use decisions are not super linear, and a little bit chaotic in the absence of those plans. I had a question about the condition updates, the facilities condition updates. And also about the historic register. As you know, the city of Portland has been now for the last 18 months or so documenting historic structures that are important to the African American community. It became really important all of a sudden about a year ago. In spite of the fact that these buildings have been in the community for a long time and have significance to African American community members that moved here in the 1940s through the Great Migration. And so as I was looking through the document, I was wondering about those, if it would be revisited, some of those buildings, such as Boise Elliott in particular, Boise Elliott Humboldt School, that is a beautiful architectural style that I wasn't familiar with actually, but could be perhaps considered, and I think the reason it wasn't considered for the register was because of the upgrades that had been done. So just to keep that in mind, that there is an inventory of these special buildings in and around Albina that I hope that we don't forget, and that there's special advantages for Black community organizations for getting those historic designations. I hope we would just be aware of that. And those are my comments. Thank you so much. It's really great to have this in hand.
I just had a brief comment that, aside from how important this is as a foundational document for all of our bond planning, it intersects with almost everything else that we do. Like all of our work and our goals on our climate action policy intersect so much with just the nitty-gritty analysis of the condition of our buildings and how they use energy and how they lose energy and all sorts of other features of their operations that are really important to trying to become a more sustainable district. Similarly, with our work on enrollment balancing, having a really good understanding of exactly what our inventory is and what condition it's in is the foundational information that we need to make all of those kind of tough decisions. So it's not just valuable in and of itself, but it informs almost everything else that we do. So thank you.
Director Brim Edwards has a question. I also just wanted to thank you for every section. There was a racial equity and social justice lens that every property went through, and I just thought that was really rich. Director Brim Edwards.
Yeah, so just a couple of questions. This is about integration and alignment. Given our earlier conversation about climate and the goals that we have for 2040, while this isn't a plan that goes to 2040, is the components in here on sustainability align with and not be in conflict with? Is this an integrated part of, I know you're going to do a scoping exercise for our climate plan, and I'm curious about the sort of alignment and integration of the two, of that future plan with.
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly don't see any conflicts between the two. It's certainly worth an effort to look and make sure that those are very much in alignment and go hand in glove, and especially when we get into the documents and deliverables further downstream from the climate crisis response policy, including administrative directives, implementation plans, future bond planning efforts. We want all those things to be very much in alignment and pointing in the same direction, and I think this is a good start to do that along with the CCRP.
Okay, and then the second question I had was, when we had the discussion about it last time, I asked specifically about the middle school portion and why Harriet Tubman wasn't in there, knowing that we know it's likely going to move, and then also the Harrison Park upgrades. At the time you said because the site horizon was 3 to 4 years out. I do see things in here that relate to the bond, say with Ida B. Wells and the moving, and same thing with Benson. And I can't remember if you told me we'll integrate things, Harriet Tubman and the Harrison Park pieces, the conversion to the middle school in this, or we're taking everything out, because it seems like there's some short horizon items in here, and then some other things, like I say, in the middle school piece that aren't in here. And I'm just wondering where it land. I don't want to lose it.
No, I appreciate that question and the attention to the detail. It was a fine line we had to walk. If we were talking to an educator, for example, and they raised a specific issue, then we wanted to honor that and include it in the document. But really the intent of the document and the kind of the gaze of the document is really 3 to 4 years in the future. So when it was up to us, within our control, we omitted details around Harriet Tubman, Harrison Park, et cetera. And we simply noted that in the document, saying at the time of this writing, we're currently studying relocation of Harriet Tubman, et cetera.
Oh, so that's in there somewhere?
Correct, yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Is that in the intro or?
It's in the Harriet Tubman section. Yep.
Okay, even better. Great. And I'm just going to make a comment before we vote that I went through it in detail, and I think there are obviously judgment calls on like what the highest and middle priorities are, and I'm comfortable with those given that we're just accepting the report, because I think some of them, it may depend on where you sit or what the circumstances are, whether you agree with the prioritizations. I think everything that you've got in the prioritization should land somewhere, but I'm not sure I agree on all the pieces, but because we're just accepting the report as the basis for future decision. So I just want to note that, because I don't want 2 years from now somebody said, you agreed with X and why aren't you putting it in a bond or something. But to me, I look at this as a document that's a great foundational piece for future decision making, but we're not making the decisions in terms of prioritization with acceptance of the document.
That's correct. Thank you for daylighting that. It does say that, and I think in the executive summary that it's not we're not making promises. This is literally just a facilities condition and kind of a state of the state and what's the vision for the future. Thank you. So, Ms. Bradshaw, do we have any public comment?
No.
So, and do we have everybody's voices on the table? Did everybody get to say, including you, Director?
I have nothing to say on this one.
Unbelievable.
I'd say, take this in. You're
Rough
doing a
Riders are
great
taken
job.
care of.
This is an unprecedented moment. So the board will now vote on Resolution 6421, acceptance of the long-range facilities plan. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Resolution 6421 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with student representative voting
Yes.
yes. Great, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan and John, for a really thorough, nice body of work.
Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this next item?
Yes, I'll start with a little standard context statement here. This is in relation to our enrollment and balancing work, specifically the second phase of our Southeast Guiding Coalition work. In June 2019, we launched into this process with some district-wide goals. We agreed to a phased regional approach, and phase one began in fall 2020. It resulted in the conversion of 5 K-8s, new boundary and program assignments for Kellogg Middle, which opened this fall. And then again in May, the board adopted a phase two charge centered on converting Harrison Park from a K-8 to a middle school, as well as thinking about increasing enrollment at Lane Middle School. So for our viewers who are tuning in, so tonight we're going to get the update from our Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz, and I see that our Regional Superintendent Esther Magoin is also here this evening. So they're going to share with you some of the updates and community feedback to date.
Good evening. I'm Claire Hertz, as Superintendent Guerrero introduced us. And to my left is Dr. Esther Olmovane. And then also to her left who's our Regional Superintendent, and then Shanice Clark, our Director of Community Engagement. We also have two co-chairs from the community, Adriel Person and Beth Kavanaugh, joining us virtually. So thank you for having us this evening to give you the latest from the Southeast Guiding Coalition. I'm going to turn it over to Shanice Clark to talk about the community engagement process we've been holding this past week, and I think even a few more coming up this week. And we want to go to the next slide, please. I did say, sorry, I'm turning it over to Esther. Sorry, excuse me, Dr. O.
Good evening, Chair DePass and fellow board members. Good evening, Superintendent Guerrero. Slide 2 shows the list of draft proposals. Next slide, please.
Dr. O, can you talk into the microphone? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, Chair DePass and fellow board members. Good evening, Superintendent Guerrero. Slide 2 shows a list of draft proposals that have been shared during the Southeast Guiding Coalition meetings. To find these proposals, you please go to the PPS main page, and on the top left-hand corner of the page, you'll find a tab with the header About. If you click on it, a list of options will emerge. Scroll down to Enrollment and Balancing. If you click on that link, it will take you to the Southeast Guiding Coalition page that shows all the proposals in detail. It is very dense. It is a lot of information, so I think it behooves us to spend some time looking at it. The open house link at the bottom of the page of slide 2 will take you to the open house page where you can listen to the recordings from the sessions. The information on this page is presented in 6 languages spoken by the vast majority of families in PPS. We are happy to provide information in languages less spoken based on request. Next slide, please. The PPS team and Southeast Guiding Coalition members recognize the need to make adjustments to our current timeline in order to accommodate the staff guidelines for the 2022-2023 school year. As a result, the implementation for Phase 2 decisions have been pushed back to the fall of 2023. Since this is an iterative process, Southeast Guiding Coalition will be able to accommodate several more meetings in an effort to truly hear and have the opportunity to consider many more voices as they give input. The details of the newly adjusted timeline will be published soon. And with that, next slide, please, and I'll turn it over to Shanice.
Good evening, Superintendent and Board of Directors. We held our open house last Wednesday and had over 470 people register for the event and had over 400 questions and comments from the community that are being summarized. And those will be shared with our Southeast Guiding Coalition members and the board and the community. We are now in the process of having small groups of conversations with students, BIPOC families, educators, and families in 6 languages, and that will inform the next steps in our process. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question about that, or do you want to wait till the end? Chair DePass, can I ask a question about that? Community engagement. I'm curious on the community engagement. Are we asking, tonight there is 2 potential suspensions of our policy? I'm wondering in our community engagement, are we asking about that? Because one of them deals with legacies, and I know that has been an issue, just families, keeping families together has been a topic, and I'm wondering if that's something, if we're asking families about that specifically, about potentially changing our policies, or is it more focused on option A, B, and C, or potentially some other ones?
Yes, so the purpose of this part of our engagement is taking a look at these proposed scenarios, and we're talking a little bit about the timeline as well, and I don't know if Claire, you'd have anything to add to that, but yeah.
So tonight the purpose is really to ask you guys as a board. You'll see in a question in a few more minutes. You're going to hear a little bit from the co-chairs first, but right now we're really wanting to hear from the board about that, and we're not really engaged. We're hearing from the community about it, but we're in terms of what's important to them, and that's why we're thus bringing the question here to you tonight. So let's go ahead and hear from the co-chairs, and then we'll go through the transitions piece, and then we'll have the discussion on that.
So the answer is no, but we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good question after we've seen the presentation and seen the question that's posted in this presentation.
Welcome, Beth and Adriel. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. We just wanted to highlight a few topics that have been coming to the surface for SCGC membership and make sure that those are on the board's radar. First one was already addressed, so all about extending the timeline to allow community engagement and good processes, particularly once the programmatic recommendations are finalized, to make sure we have time to really delve into the neighborhood boundary concerns. So we're glad to hear that the timeline has been extended.
Another is consideration of the voices that are not at the table. What are the reasons behind that? For instance, there may be a concern that the process is not seen as likely to impact the experiences of those absent voices. While I don't speak for all parents of color as an African American parent, I am fully aware that these boundaries and the enrollment changes may impact the location that my student is at, but it's not likely to impact his experience. He'll still be in a space as an African American male with very little representation of any academic leadership, teachers, or administrators that share his culture. And it's important that we over-communicate the racial equity and social justice work that's being done right now and the goals to leverage those RESJ partners to enhance the climate so that as our students are moving in this space, that they're being followed by those resources that are going to help give them culture and community, in particular with the African American and Native American students that don't have teachers in a dual language environment that speak their same language or look like them or are just there to support and be a buffer for some of the marginalization and some of the, to be quite frank, some of the challenges that African American students face in terms of being received in spaces where they are a minority and not a majority.
Another issue that has been a real stumbling block for the coalition so far is around the location of creative science. We keep coming back to it because many of the other details in the proposal flow from that choice of where creative science is relocated. And we still don't feel we have the information we need from PS staff to be confident that any of the proposals or how they meet the goals of this process. So we understand the benefits of maintaining a K-8 option in the outer southeast and minimizing disruption to the creative science community, given that they're already being asked to relocate. I think that most people agree that in a vacuum we would do both of those things, but this isn't happening in a vacuum. Merging CSS with another school causes enormous disruption to that school community as well. So ideally, we want to ensure that the level of change we're asking of creative science and of the receiving school community feels balanced. And coalition members so far have concerns that we're not finding balance in these proposals. Under the disruption of merging with a focus option program, these proposals would convert the receiving school to a K-8, in two cases undoing a conversion from K-8 to K-5 that just happened this year. In the proposal that puts CSS at Arleta would lose a huge portion of its current neighborhood, splitting the community on top of everything else. And the proposal of CSS Bridger would be required to rely on portable rooms indefinitely, which is something we've been told we're trying to avoid. So all this leads to coalition members asking to see options where creative science could either become a K-5 program or split the K-5 and middle school grades between two different buildings. We think it's crucial to understand whether this would significantly lessen the disruption to the community where CSS relocates and strike a more equitable balance around the change we're asking of everyone involved. We're open to the idea that that might not be a better solution, but so far we've yet to see a model in a way that PPS staff has been willing to model different approaches to DLI considerations based on feedback, for example. The most we've gotten is a couple of columns on a spreadsheet in proposal C2 that suggest that the K-5 approach is worth considering. So in order to move on from this question and get the rest of our work, we'd really like to hear from the district's instructional experts on whether they support maintaining creative science as a K-8 or reloading it as a K-5 instead, given a full understanding of the impact on receiving schools in both situations. At this plan, ultimately, is the district's and the board's call, but the public deserves to have confidence that you considered every angle on the decisions that are made.
I'd like to be clear that previously my mention of African American and Native American students not being voices that are heard was absolutely because part of this charge is to increase the enrollment of African American and Native American students specifically. And having said that, I personally am aware of the RESJ work that's being done because I'm a partner in my professional world, but I don't think that that's being communicated widely or broad or deep enough to the families that are not at this table and not in these conversations because of maybe their reluctance or their disbelief that there is going to be an important impact to their family experiences in these spaces. I think I've also been made aware that there are goals in terms of increasing African American teachers and administrators, and I think that that needs to be widely communicated as well. I think that because I am a partner, I do definitely applaud the racial equity and social justice work that the district has committed to. I believe, though, that we need to move into a space where the acknowledgement of the robust work that needs to be done and the shifts from intentions to reality in terms of getting teachers of color that are in this space, that are committed to this space and retaining those teachers, that's going to make a huge difference for parents like me who have young children that are going to need to be in Portland Public Schools long term. I myself am a product of Portland Public Schools, and I know the experience of being underrepresented, and I just want to make sure that when we are getting our families, when we're having these conversations with our BIPOC families, our African American families in particular, that have a history in this space, that they know that there are real commitments to making those changes for our students.
Another area that members are looking for clarity on is how this current SCGC process will inform and interact with the upcoming high school balancing process. Lots of questions coming from the community around what those high school feeder patterns are, how middle school and elementary feeder assignments in this process would then inform or potentially determine what high school assignments might look like. So that's just sort of an area where the timeline makes it challenging for clarity and makes it hard for folks to know what they're getting behind.
Is it you or me?
It's me.
Did you want to touch on that last one, Adriel, or I can about?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to take that. Data for DLI outcomes with regards to whole school dual language recommendations. I think we just need a little bit more clarity and visibility of that information so that the families and the coalition can have informed decision making when we're talking about the options for these changes.
Yeah, it sounds like there's data that's been referred to, but we haven't. So definitely that's something that coalition members and community members are interested in having more detail. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share that.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Beth and Adriel, for joining us tonight. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Thursday both, so 3 days this week. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. And this is what Director Brim Edwards was asking about in terms of the legacy policy. And so this is a summary of questions that are coming up about transitions. And this is of significant importance to community members. And so that's why we bring it here before the board to share what we're hearing and try to get some information, some discussion with you to find what you're thinking at this point. So as we look at transitions, when we have a boundary change, We have a policy and administrative directive that says that current students would remain through the highest grade. And so the standard time for implementation would be 6 years for an elementary school and 3 years for an middle school. If we were to accelerate that, the enrollment would could be over 2 years rather than 6 and 3. And then also special program relocation, grade reconfigurations, and neighborhood program closure, all grade levels would move at once, and it would all happen in 1 year. That's per policy. That's not necessarily in our proposals, just to be clear, okay? So as we look at this, we have student transfers available, and we have, in past balancing processes, we've had sometimes where we followed the process, and sometimes the board has actually provided a resolution that went outside of the policy. So I just want to talk about if we had transfer students, they may in policy now, and administrative director, they may remain at a school impacted by boundary change, and so standard they could do that for 5 years, but if we accelerated it, we might want to say 2 years. And new students are guaranteed a seat at the school where their transfer sibling remains enrolled, right? So that's again in policy. And so that could be much longer than 6 years. And it could be 1 year or more if we accelerated, depending on the space availability. Okay, so it might be a cap.
Longer than 6 years with successive siblings.
Yes, it could be very long, yes. And transfer students may move with their current cohort if impacted by grade reconfiguration or neighborhood program closure. So we actually have, so we'd be 5 years on elementary and 2 years on middle school, and 1 year or more depending on if we accelerated in space availability. Now this one actually ties to what we did in phase 1 when we had some students that actually finished their elementary school. It's another consideration, and they didn't carry forward into the middle school with where they were transferred to. They actually went back to their home middle school once they finished 5th grade. And that's something that we have had there's been different practices in this district, so that's something we want to kind of have you think about. For some, in the Northeast, we allowed students to move, and this last one we said no, trying to keep the numbers down in Kellogg. So in terms of benefits of staying with the policy or acceleration, so if you accelerate, the enrollment would grow quicker at small schools, and overcrowding relief happens faster. And the challenges would students have an additional transition away from a school they know, and staffing changes are more abrupt. So it's a quicker rather than a steady transition. And then thinking about our racial equity, social justice lens, we prioritized our schools with the highest number of underserved students and what would be beneficial to them. So thinking about, we're focused on Harrison Park Middle School and Harrison Park K-5. Well, the K-5 would just move because we're transitioning grade levels. But when I think about Lane Middle School, if we did the standard policy, it would take a long time for Lane to grow. So is there a way for us, and those are some of our most underserved students at Lane Middle School. So are there mitigations that can be made to support schools during that transition? So while our racial equity, social justice lens might say, let's accelerate, and then at the same time, there's the social emotional component that when we listen to parents and students about staying with people they already know, is there a way to do both? By maybe it's providing additional resources for programs at Lane until they get their enrollment up. would be an example of a mitigating factor.
I have a question about the transitions with the boundary changes. What I don't see there, what I see in the transfer is the legacy of siblings. But let's say like we're talking about Lewis, maybe changing their boundary. So if someone has let's say a second grader at Lewis now, and they will have a kindergartner in fall of 23 when we implement these changes, that kindergartner might go to Whitman while their second grader is still at Lewis, correct? Because the boundary change doesn't have a legacy piece. Is that correct, Judy? Because that's what I don't see on the slide.
I'm going to ask Director of our Enrollment Services.
I saw her like.
Yes, she needs to respond to that for us.
May I sneak in, ladies?
Oh,
don't go far. Good evening. So that incoming sibling now moves down into that blue box where they're the new student guaranteed a seat at the school where their transfer sibling remains enrolled.
Okay, so because the student who was in the boundary is now considered a transfer student, then that is where that legacy piece for siblings.
And then they attach the siblings, and that's what causes
The
it to
huge
take so many
delay and-
years
Yeah.
before it could fully be implemented.
Yeah. So that, I just was curious about how that fell out. Thank you.
So can I just ask a question about nomenclature? You're calling it a standard policy? It's just it's our policy, right? I mean, it's
It's our policy and an administrative directive. Some of this comes from
But
both sides.
the legacy and the being able to stay in the top grade is actually board policy. Because we had almost a year's discussion about this in the policy committee, and with no changes made. A lot of talk about changes, but no changes made. So I think I'm seeing a nodding ahead that it is the current it's not a standard policy, it's the board policy, and that if we were going to accelerate, actually we'd be suspending the policy and changing it.
That's correct. The hedging is that special program or relocation and grade reconfiguration is actually not addressed in the relevant policy. So there are parts of this that are practice, and you can see the practical implications of moving all students at once.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Sure.
The exception is?
Yeah. Special program relocation or grade reconfiguration isn't specifically addressed in the boundary change policy. So that's why it's a practice, but it doesn't have specific policy language that governs the procedure, the way it happens.
So that would pertain to both creative science and DLI?
That's correct.
Creative science is a school.
But there's no, but
It's
it
not
doesn't
special
have
program,
a boundary.
It's a school. I
Indeed.
mean, it has a school ID from the state. It's a
Yes.
school.
The relevant policy 4.10.045, student assignment to neighborhood schools, actually doesn't govern how students are moved when they're assigned to a different type of school, not a neighborhood school.
That seems like an oversight versus potentially, but it's not a program, it's a school.
Yeah, but the language under standard transfer rights, that is layman's terms for things that are in the student assignment to neighborhood school policy.
It has a boundary between neighborhood school.
Yes.
So the difference with creative science is they don't have a boundary.
I think it sounds like we're opening up for questions, unless you have anything you'd like to add.
So let's go to the next slide, please. I want to leave with a question for the board. As we implement, as we move forward with an implementation of the Phase 2 final proposal, which will begin in 2023, should we proceed using the standard student assignment policy and procedures or an accelerated implementation? So we really want to hear from the board. As you look back at the slide about transitions, and Judy is your expert here, Judy Brennan, so that if you have specific questions you need clarified to help answer this question, we can have that discussion. But our community is really wanting to hear what our board is thinking and where we're headed with this. It will also help the Southeast Guiding Coalition know what to do as they're preparing the final recommendation for the board.
So before we go back to the questions on the previous slide, which it would be good if you guys could flip back to that slide for our discussion, I just want to go back to Beth's question about our evaluation of the impacts of the whether creative science moves as a K-5 or a K-8, and it's unclear and impacts on both equally. And what is our process for sort of solving for that?
So it depends on the location and the capacity of the school where they go and the number of students of the neighborhood program. Right now in the 3 different A, B, and C, they each have there's a different location. So when there isn't enough room for all of the students, one of the reasons Bridger was considered is they have the portables, and then as time progresses, the number of lottery slots will go down. So then the neighborhood students will become the creative science school. Just if you think about Sunnyside, that when it initially started, actually, if you would describe Sunnyside because you were here when that happened, I think that would be better. But in essence, right now we're at 75% neighborhood, 25% lottery, so the number can be reduced over time by limiting the lottery and increasing the neighborhood.
So you're saying that the host school for creative science would over time essentially become a neighborhood school that is operating under that pedagogy?
With the constructivist theme and a limited number of space for transfer students. And we believe that that would also mean that over time we could end the use of those modular classrooms that are on the campus.
At Bridger?
At Bridger.
If it's at Bridger.
And that would be, I think, going back to your question, if they were operating as a K-8, but we hear and we'll work with our contractor Flow Analytics on additional analysis of other options for the creative science students. One thing that we'll be considering is whether there is space at their feeder middle school for the 6-8 students so that kids would migrate together from a K-5 campus onto a middle school. So we did model it with Harrison Park. One question is there enough space? But then another question is, what's the program complexity on that campus? And I think that's worthy of consideration. The other 2 places that we've shown, one is Arleta, and it feeds to Kellogg. We know that Kellogg could be really full. So we're gonna pause on that. And then the other would be Woodstock, and we know that Woodstock at this time would feed to Hosford, and it is really full. So we have to look at both campus levels to see is there enough space for the students, but also how do the programs work together to make a strong middle school that isn't overburdened. One of the goals in this proposal C, I'm talking too much now, is that middle schools, if possible, only have like a single focus option and not have so many programs that you don't have attention on the campus.
As a follow-up question to that, so if creative science is transitioning into a neighborhood school and we're transitioning away from K-8s in neighborhood schools, I guess how does that kind of align?
So the way it works we have 2 other examples of this in the district, and one is the Sunnyside Environmental School, which used to be a middle school and then converted, and actually I believe Director Brim Edwards was a board member version 1 when that change was made.
Anything that happened in the last century, I was here.
The only old person on the board.
It moved into the Sunnyside School, which was a very small neighborhood school, and they merged together. when that happened, the neighborhood families weren't sure that that's what they wanted for their students. So we had opt-out opportunities. After a few years, we didn't need those opt-out opportunities anymore, but we would still make it available today to any student who moves into the Sunnyside neighborhood and doesn't think that that specialized program would be the best fit for their child. Our other example is Buckman Arts, which is a K-5 school in Southeast that also is what we call a hybrid. That used to be a term that we could use. In the last year, it doesn't quite resonate the same way anymore. But it both serves neighborhood students and students who enter in the lottery for arts-based instruction.
So can I ask, my questions are going to be frustratingly high level, sort of a little bit more sort of academic. I'm really curious in knowing, as I guess what I'm saying is as we go through this proposal, I'll be curious in knowing numbers around this, because for me, I'm kind of coming back to, it is hard to say overall that I want to go standard or I want to go accelerated if I don't know sort of what the impact is going to be in the next few years, because I think that makes a difference. And when I look at things like the sibling policy, which I know this, maybe I should say past iterations of this board have really focused on, to me, you're talking like a handful of students and a huge burden on the families you're impacting, versus some of these others, you're talking huge numbers of students and spreading that around. And, in political, theory, right? If you have really widespread benefits and really focused narrow costs, you're going to have really intense opposition. Versus if you can spread some of those costs around, you'll diminish that a little bit. And so for me, the question is hard to answer. I want to see these changes happen relatively quickly. On the other hand, if we push the changes faster and we get more opposition, then we're not able to make as big a change as we might if we sort of stretched it out. And I think these decisions for me are not 1 and 2 year decisions, they're 5 and 10 year decisions, which is why I'm less troubled by the idea of like letting the sibling go there for another 4 years is one student, right? It's not going to have a huge impact on the school. On the other hand, letting a whole cohort sort of stay somewhere might delay those changes for 5 or more years. So for me, I'm going to need to see a little bit more in terms of as we come up with specific proposals, how do these standard sort of practices, policies and practices really, like when we look at our projections, how quickly or how slowly does enrollment change over time?
Would you benefit then by having another column that had numerical, like a number of students impacted?
I think what I guess I'm saying is when we get to specific proposals, seeing how applying these would impact the changes over time would be helpful for me.
So Director Scott, one of the things that the Southeast Guiding Coalition leadership just asked of you is guidance in creative science being K-8 in a school or K-5 separated out with 6-8, because that will help them with moving forward with proposals. If we keep them as a K-8, there's only a few schools where they'd actually fit, okay? If you allowed the 6-8 to go to a middle school and kept it as a K-5 at a neighborhood school, and then the 6-8 part of the focus option moving to another middle school, comprehensive middle school as a program within the school, then that provides more places for that opportunities for capacity for creative science. So they're asking for that because that's important to them. I understand it's also hard for you because you don't have a proposal from them here to look at to see how it impacts it. And so it's that chicken and the egg thing, which comes first, right? And so what I guess in terms of keeping it at a higher level, I want to get a sense from this board, is it important for you as a board to keep the legacy policy in place, because it is board policy and it's our current board policy, and we're not going to change it as we're finalizing these proposals in the next 2 months. Let me be clear that I'm not asking for that. So is that something that we would consider in a resolution? Or is that something that we want to, last time we felt pretty strongly about sticking to some board policy. So I want to get a sense from you where some of you stand, even if it's not all of you, but if there's some of you that have strong feelings about that, It would be very helpful to know that.
I really, for me, creative, like you asked the question about creative science, and what I heard the chairs ask is for our instructional leaders to weigh in on creative science as well. But for me, I think, creative science, the value that I see is the smaller middle school. I know that we have kids that struggle in some of our larger middle schools, and just like Sunnyside is an option for some families, I think that's one of the strengths of creative science. So I think for me, putting creative science as a program within a larger middle school, while that does keep some of the smallness, it loses some of the reason that especially some of our special education families have chosen creative science. So I would like to see us, that would be my reasoning for keeping it as a K-8 and looking at the Sunnyside model. And I know that's complicated, but I think if we're going to continue that program, that's what makes it different, is that it's that smaller school environment that offers a respite for especially students who struggle in the larger middle schools. For me, I really struggle with the sibling legacy. My story is that I had a friend who had her kid was in 5th grade and the other one was in kindergarten, right? So the 5th grader left and the kindergartner stayed. And so it does impact, and it can be up to a full classroom of students. And I saw it just as Llewellyn went through the boundary change where Tacoma became a dividing line and families on the south end of Tacoma went to Dunaway, how that sort of rolled through the school over time. And there were good things about it and hard things about it. And I think it's what you said about having those supports for schools that are transitioning is really key, because the transitions aren't even, right? The staffing does go up and down, and it is weird if we do the slower transition. But there is something about that social emotional health. And for me, the keeping middle schoolers, like I feel like if a middle school student is in middle school, they should get to stay, especially in middle school, because that's such a funky developmental time. I'd be more okay with setting aside our policy for some elementary students. But especially for middle school, I think it's important to keep those students there. And then again, that sibling thing it's really, really hard. I understand that it's a burden on families to have students at 2 schools, and it also means that these changes take a long time. And when you talk about 5 to 10 years, our neighborhoods are changing, and they're dynamic, and they're changing rapidly. And so if we implement these, it's like we're going to be right back in 5 years doing it again, because some of these boundaries are going to be dynamic. So it's
not if we do it right. I mean, that's
Right.
the thing. If we're trying to make a change in 1 year.
Can I moderate our discussion a little bit, because I've seen Director Hollins from the side eye wanting to say something, and he's not from a big family like I'm, so he's being too polite. He can't jump in. So can we hear from Director Hollins and figure out how to take turns in speaking?
Thank you, Chair DePass. So I'm going to steal a line from Director Scott on this one. I'm not an expert at this, so I'm going to ask the district, what are you guys recommended out of the 2 options that you guys are proposing?
Are we recommending? So maybe a little bit on the pros and cons. If we stay with the standard, then it will provide relief to many of our families in the Southeast. It'll delay relief to some of our underserved students. So the majority of our families would want a standard implementation. And as we look in our racial equity and social justice lens, then we need to consider the schools that we're focusing on are ones that need increased enrollment so they have additional resources. It's not just the number of, increasing the teachers, but it's also having enough students in a class to have a program, certain elective programs, to be robust. So that robust feeling is also needed in those schools. So that's the part, is you've seen a lot of families come down here tonight because they're very interested in what we're going to implement, because it's very important. And probably the most common thing we hear from families is, please let us stay in our school where we are now with the students that we have with us, so that we can just stay the way we are.
I want to make a comment about that. I made so I've attended multiple Southeast Guiding. I think I've missed 1 or 2, and I may miss part of Thursdays, but I've been very dedicated to the process in an effort to hear from folks. And I also wanted to share just publicly, I've been to lots of different schools in Portland and Mexico and Washington, D.C., and all over the place. And I survived. And I actually have benefited from it as an adult by changing. It is like it's totally survivable. and it can be enriching. What I think we need to focus on and what we need to be just uncomfortable with is that this is where our racial equity policy bumps up a little bit about doing things differently. Our school district, as you know, has been around for 170 years and has a very poor track record of serving kids of color. And I'd like to see, while I'm sitting here, I'd like to see that move incrementally, and it's personal. And change is hard, I get that, and it's also survivable. I really was impacted by a couple things I've heard during this process. One was from Dr. Proctor about the benefits of single-strand DLI programs to offer more robust offerings. And the other thing that's escaped me right now, but I think that we're struggling with change at a time when the pandemic has shown us anything is that we need to change. That we aren't serving we aren't serving our underserved kids the way that they deserve, and that we in our minds would like to serve them. And that is my guiding value. I would also be interested in hearing more from our instructional leaders about the creative science and splitting those up, and what the logistical implications are, and what the implications for families and learning outcomes most importantly.
So one thing the Southeast Guiding Coalition has asked us to do is our instructional leadership said to keep it as a K-8, and that's what we reported back to the Southeast Guiding Coalition. But one of the things is that they want to make sure the instructional leaders understand the trade-offs in the communities that are being impacted. So I am committed to taking that back to our instructional leadership with the proposals at hand that are that are still being modified. I want to be clear on that with everyone in the community, that we're still revising proposals. But showing what are the trade-offs with the 3 proposals that are currently in being under discussion, to see what is happening with a neighborhood school. So for instance, boundary changes more kids may have to move to another school in order for them to fit within the school, to have creative science come in as a K-8. That is certainly a dilemma that has been brought forward from the community, and that's something I'll take back to the instructional leaders to ask them what their thinking is on that.
I also, Director Lowry, you said something about neighborhoods are really dynamic, and they've been very dynamic in the last decade or so in Portland, even longer in some neighborhoods like Albina, and let's say 50-year horizons. And so I think to keep that in mind, that we all have a certain nostalgia for the street we grew up on, or the school we went to, the house we lived in, the neighborhood we lived in, and there's a deep sense of nostalgia, and yet development does happen, and things change, and it's hard, but the sun comes up every day, so as long as the climate remains, on track, the sun comes up the next day, and people are adaptable, and I really, again, want to reiterate that the kids that we are not serving are my highest priority in this process. The kids from Harrison Park that I've taken on environmental outdoor field trips, that speak multiple languages, that don't have cars, that moved continents to get here, not just across the street, those are the kids I'm thinking about. Those are the kids that are in my heart.
So I have a couple, both questions and comments, because I do have a point of view. I may be wearing my Northeast Portland shirt today, but I'm feeling my Southeast Portlandness. So one of the things is just the whole issue of Creative Science School as a K-8. So in Southeast Portland, we already have 2 other K-8s, Winter Haven and Sunnyside. And I don't know of any other quadrant of the city that has that. So just, again, the concentration of like focus programs and neighborhood programs being displaced by special programs, or doing things differently than everywhere else, is disproportionately in Southeast. The other thing I'd like to suggest in this slide, I think the first one actually should be up to 5 years, because you do, the highest grade students, of course, transfer out. So it's not like you're waiting for all the kindergartners to go. You each year get some, right? Some movement. So it's not like you have to wait 5 years. You get it, but you don't get the full enchilada till 5 years. Is that? So I think that would be a little, maybe more accurate to represent that, because you do get some that, so the first grade rolling out. And then I think just because I was on the policy committee, not the chair at the time, but when there were long conversations about should we get rid of the legacy policy, or should we, rip off the Band-Aid and have students, not go to the next grade? And we ultimately decided not to make the change. And so I think we shouldn't just be thinking about, like, it's easy to do because maybe kids and families in Southeast aren't going to come in hundreds into this building, which they did, they have in the past. And when we opened Harriet Tubman and Roseway Heights, we didn't change the policy. It has a long tail, and I
would just say I don't think we decided not to change the policy. I think the pandemic interrupted our conversation. So
we didn't do it for Roseway Heights or Harriet Tubman. And I'm thinking to the high school ones. And so if we're going to say, for example, middle schools, we're not going to, we're going to let them continue the highest grade because they're in middle schools, and boy, you don't want disruption for kids in middle schools. Well, I can tell you, high schools are going to be 2x. So I think we should think of it in the context of what we've done and what we're going to do, because it would be hard for me to explain, hey, Southeast, we are going to have a different set of rules for you than we had for other communities that showed up in the hundreds of people and said, don't make that change. And then, so I think just keeping it in the context, are we going to set a precedent? Are we willing to do it for other quadrants of the city? And then the last piece, on the siblings, a lot of the community engagement, the reason I asked about it when Shanice was, you're still there, this was an issue that when I talked to parents in Southeast, especially the K-8s, there was some attachment to the under-enrolled K-8s, even though they weren't getting the same robust electives because of the essence of family. And families wanting, older kids walking their younger siblings home, or we don't have a parent who's going to go to different, go to the middle school and the elementary school. And so they, even though they knew maybe they were getting something different, there was an element of family at the school. And I think we heard that in the initial set of community engagement, which was Harrison Park, people want to be able to walk to the schools, and there is this sense of family community. So I would just hope that if there's some, suspension of the policy around families and siblings, that we think about it, and also in that context, because not every family has a parent that midday can go to several schools to, pick up their kids. So those are just my thoughts. So it's not that I wouldn't do it, but I want to also us to be consistent, not to have hey, Southeast, we can do that to Southeast, but we're not willing to do it to the other schools. So just my thinking.
Can we think about it in terms of, we have new information coming in now, and we have new goals and a new board? And just think about it I hear the fairness piece, and I also think that if there's imitation mode or there's innovation mode. I'd like us to be not imitating what we've done, considering who we have not served.
Well, that's exactly,
So
these
I
are the
think
most
there's both.
underserved students. That's why from my so I guess there's two sides of the coin. One
Of
could
course.
be the side of, to me, it's there was a privilege element to other students being able to keep their families together at a school. And I want to respect that. And also, I wouldn't want 3 years later for us to say, oh, we did that for Southeast, but we're now not in the innovation mode for high schools, because we're hearing from a lot of high school parents, because they, there is this attachment to a high school that seems very intense.
I can guarantee you can get attached to 2 high schools. I hear
I
what you're
have-
saying, though. Can we, so I think I've heard that we'd like to hear from the instructional leaders about creative science, and then the cultural representation piece, I would personally like to hear more about, what the plan is for moving forward with this and doing this hiring of, and recruitment of teachers and administrators of color. That's important for me to hear. And then, do we have any other board members that would like to make another demand? And I'm sorry, make another
I don't know about a
Make another-
demand.
a comment, or make a request of staff.
I have a couple of comments, and I think Jackson does too. Sorry, I think I jumped in front of you. One is that, the whole reason we started this process or restarted this process was to to continue our march toward comprehensive middle schools, because we collectively agree that that offers more equitable opportunities for our students. And so, that being the case, it's hard for me to see justification of keeping Lane Middle School essentially languishing in outer southeast Portland because of severe under-enrollment. And we're not going to really be able to fortify Lane and provide the same type of environment that we're providing at Kellogg or we're providing at our other comprehensive middle schools until we figure out how to get them a full complement of students. And so that's something that we need to address, because we can't leave it hanging out there. And it's not like I think I just had this great idea. I know that that's one of the foundational questions of this whole process. But that's going to require some acceleration and some bold decisions here if we're really going to have a focus on giving Lane that same opportunity. Just the other point I wanted to make.
Actually, can I just very specifically that point, because you're getting at exactly my dilemma on this. I really need to see some numbers in terms of how much more quickly, can I say that much more quickly, Lane will be filled with an accelerated versus a standard. Because again, I keep thinking, the bulk of these moves will happen in 2 or 3 years. I mean, this long tail is really for a very small number of students. The other thing I will say is that is not, the enrollment there is not preventing us from providing the full experience at Lane.
That's true.
We can make a decision as a board and as a district to increase the resources there, knowing that more students will be coming there so that they don't languish for another few years. So I just want to be clear, we can make that decision irrespective of this.
Yes and no. I mean, we have done that in our K-8s for our middle grades. We've made huge investments to provide a more equitable experience there, but still, we can look at the numbers. It does make a difference when you have half the number of students that you could have in that building.
And I'm just going to say again, though, that the more families we disrupt, and it is disruptive, and we need to acknowledge it's disruptive, the more families we disrupt, the harder it's going to be to make big changes. And so actually, when I hear Chair DePass say, we need to make these changes, it's way past time, I'm all on board, but I also know we are going to fill this with hundreds and hundreds of people.
Yeah.
If we make really rapid changes, like next year your kid's going to a different school, no ifs, ands, or buts, versus saying, look, we're looking long-term and
Yeah.
we'll make the changes, but it's going to take a little while to get there. And in the meantime, can we be boosting those resources so that the students at those schools
Yeah.
are getting the
Yeah,
education?
there's a lot of strategies.
I did also add that I have heard from folks in the community a fear of Lane, which makes me really sad, that this fear of, we don't want to go to school with those kids. And I do think that that's something
Yes.
we need to talk about and address, that how
Agreed.
we marginalize certain groups of students. And I understand what you're saying, Director Scott, about let's do this slowly and let's because it is disruptive to family, not
Sorry,
slowly, but
I need to say, I didn't say do it
slowly.
slowly. I want to see what the impact
right.
is of
You want to see,
Yeah.
but I also think we just need to talk about some of that institutional racism that's part of how our schools have been set up, how our families have placed themselves, and some of the fears, and how do we listen to those fears, but also again challenge folks to think in new ways, and for us all to think in new ways. This is a very complicated issue, and I think it's, when I came on school board, I thought it was going to be easy, and there would just be the right answer would be clear, and everybody else was dumb, and they just needed me to be here to tell everybody what the right answer is. And what I'm learning is that there are a lot of times when there isn't a right answer. Like I see our Alita folks are still here, and as we try to weigh these really heavy issues, there isn't one clear, like, this is what you have to do, there are, at least 3 options before us, if not more, and there's deep, robust, important conversations to be had. And so I appreciate tonight the sharing of perspectives, the engagement with this, and Director Scott, I do appreciate your comments about how we think about the sort of acceptable rate of change for our families and students. Again, keeping in mind what you said, Director DePass, this is about our students, and especially our most underserved students, and how do we, know with data what is the least harm and the most success we can have for those students.
Thank you for summarizing that so well. I think I'm just looking at the time, and we've got staff and some professionals waiting for us to move on. Do you feel like you have?
I had one other quick comment, and I think
Okay.
Jackson had a comment. Just my other quick comment sort of goes back to our values, which is that we are a district of neighborhood schools for the most part, and we're hopefully going to get more information from our educational leaders about recommendations on creative science. But when we look at potentially moving creative science as a K-8, that de facto says that we're prioritizing that school community over the school community where it's likely to be situated and where they're being displaced to some extent. And that, I believe, is in conflict with our values, because we are primarily a district of neighborhood schools. So I do think we have to look at that in terms of the value proposal. And just since you're looking for input, as much as I want to accelerate this process so that we can see the impact of our goals sooner, I have a real issue with splitting up siblings and families, and that would be very hard for me to think of an instance where I'd be willing to do that, because we work so hard to engage our families and support our families in being really connected to their school communities, that's just really hard.
Okay, Student Representative Jackson, and then we're going to move on.
I'll be really quick. So when talking about how the policy was in this policy was in policy committee, I do believe we got student and community feedback on these very questions, which is still pretty recent. I'd say 1.5, 2 years at the most, probably. So it'd be worth looking at what our students and community are actually feeling. Also, I'm going to agree that we could put in place mitigation strategies so that this longer term approach still addresses the current needs. Also, I agree, Chair DePass, about building resiliency. Michelle. I also think students have been faced with a pandemic, which no other students before have had to experience, a time of isolation, upheaval. I think throwing another thing at them is going to be a little too much. So again, in line with that, I also have a little bit of a problem with an immediate approach, just in the sense of we're taking a group of students from one school and putting them into another school that already has a sense of community, already has group norms, and these other groups of students could have different norms. It's going to take a long time to readjust so that they become one cohesive community.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Thank you. And it sounds like we need a little bit more discussion, a little bit more information. And I acknowledge it's a complex issue. It's and I appreciate your personal testimony there about how you thought everything would just be
A little sarcastic
so
there,
easy.
but yeah.
Well, and I just also want to thank the co-chairs that were, I'm sure they're in the background there somewhere, because we can't see you anymore, but thank you for joining us and sharing your comments tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this next item, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report?
Yes, Chair and Directors, many of you will be familiar with this annual report, and so the Comprehensive Financial Report is also an exciting item to discuss. Our CFO.
We should put you first because it's so exciting.
Who does not want to talk about a financial audit?
Mr. Nilberto
We've got all the time in the world for a clean audit.
It's like those 8 o'clock econ classes.
Right. Well, good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Guerrero. Good evening, everyone. Although I do have to say, Dr. Comsan, you did, at least during the committee updates, I did not hear about the robust conversation we had at Thursday's committee
I
meeting regarding
realized
the
that after the fact, and that's my bad. So take it away, and then I'll chime in on a little bit of our discussion from the audit committee, but that's my bad, and you're right to call me out.
Yeah, no worries. And I also want to introduce Tim Gillette, who's joining us from Talbot, Corvola, and Warwick. TKW, our financial, our auditors who review the information. And I'll in a minute I'll turn it over to Tim to go and share the report. But I think more importantly, I'm excited to say that we've been issued an unmodified opinion. So in technical speak and in regular speak, that means it's a clean audit. And so it's a fourth year in a row, and it's a big deal because the
money's good, directors.
The team works extremely hard to put this information together, and I want to give a shout out to Tracy Pender, Cheryl Ancelone, and Ashley Finch and Melissa Esminger on the team who really put a lot of effort into all of our financials, not just this moment in time during an audit, but throughout the year. And so it really is a sign of just the accuracy and efficiency of our financial statements and how we present them. Now, we had a conversation around like how clear are they? Right? They're still financial statements, so it may take another CPA to fully understand them and whatnot. But I think that the way the information is presented and having an outside entity validate that and provide an unmodified opinion on our processes is a big deal. And so with that, I do want to introduce Tim Gillette again from TKW, who has additional information to share, and then we can open up for questions and take it from there.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Norberto. Hope everyone can hear me. I can't see anybody, but
we can hear
appreciate you letting me do this remotely this year. You may or may not have heard I came from one board meeting at 6 o'clock, an audit committee meeting at 6:30, and that's why I'm on the agenda at this point for you guys. Roberto did steal away some of my thunder here. The big news is, of course, it's an unmodified opinion, a clean audit, the best kind you can get from your auditors. So, and what you always want to have, and generally what the district has had in the past. So, the ACFR, as we call it now, it's not what it used to be. It's the annual comprehensive financial report instead of the comprehensive annual financial report by statement of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. The ACFR is a big document. It's probably 150 pages, counting the unnumbered pages in here. Only a small part of it is the auditors. Most of it really belongs to your finance and accounting staff. And again, Roberto thanked them, but I will thank them as well. Tracy and Cheryl and Ashley and okay, I'm drawing a blank on the fourth one, but
Melissa. They
do a great job, terrific job. Really appreciate working with them. So our report, as he said, well, I won't go through all of this. It's a clean audit opinion. It takes us 3 pages to say, in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented. The good news is there's no big new accounting standards that would change how anything is accounted for this year. So the financial statements themselves look kind of like they have in the past. See, if you get all the way to the back of the report, there's another report from us. The state of Oregon asks us to look at certain things, or requires us to look at certain things, like deposit of public funds and indebtedness limitations and so forth. And we have done that. And we did have a couple of small things to report there, like many years in our testing of the ADM, we found a couple of errors. And in our teacher experience testing, we found a couple of errors as well, which is not unusual, as it's happened it usually happens. I will say it has come down from, if you go back to like 2018, in our sample of teachers, there were like 8 that were off, and it's down to 2 now, so things have improved. The other thing we do, the federal government asked us to do something called a single audit. I like how it kind of disappears there on me, but and they prescribe how we do this, what we do, what we look at, and the compliance requirements that the district is required to comply with, and that we look at and make sure that they do. There are a couple of reports in here that look similar, but one's more focused on the financial statements and one is focused on that compliance. Happy to report there were no findings this year at all, which that has not always been the case for the district. If you go back a few years, there have been some findings in the past. So, an especially good year. So, oh, and Melissa is the one whose name escaped me for a moment. So sorry about that, Melissa. But on the whole, a very good, clean audit this year. You all should be happy and proud of yourselves, I think. Happy to take questions. I did present this to the audit committee last week. They had a chance to discuss it with me in more depth and go through any questions that they had. But we do work for the board. Although we work with management, we work for the board. So happy to take any questions. And if any time outside of this meeting you're reading through this, you're staying up late one night going through that 150 pages and think, oh my gosh, I really should ask Tim about this, please feel free to contact me directly. And yeah, happy to do that. So
that's
happy to
great.
take questions.
Thank you. Board members, do we have any questions or any comments from anybody on the audit committee?
We had a collective head nod in the audit committee and recommend the board's acceptance of this consolidated annual financial report.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here so late. Norberto, did you have any questions or comments? It's a very boring report. It's exactly the type of report.
It's an exciting outcome, a good outcome that we like. So,
I want to hear what his questions are.
It sounds like you might have already had all of your questions answered.
Yeah, obviously it doesn't end here. If there are follow-up questions, you are up late at night, by the fireplace, reading the audit. Definitely don't hesitate to reach out. But I think that it just speaks volumes of the team and the circumstances that I'm just really grateful to be part of that team and help support. But it's the team there that took the lead. Yeah.
Well, thank you to you, Norberto, and also Mr. Gillette. Appreciate the suggestion for anybody that has insomnia to be able to reach out to you. We never have a lack of reading here, so appreciate your time here. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6422?
I'm making a motion.
Second.
I'm making a motion. I'm on it tonight.
Acceptance of the annual comprehensive financial report, reports to management, and the report on requirements for federal awards. Green. Do I have a second?
Second.
Hollins. Second adoption of Resolution 6422, and is there any board discussion? And Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No. I just want to thank Chief Delgadillo and his team. Of course, Mr. Gillette and his and our outside auditors can't do what they need to do unless they get the information in a timely and responsive way from our team. And this occurred when our finance department was also significantly understaffed. So we appreciate, and still is. If anybody wants to apply for a job in finance with a great boss,
yes, come join Team CFO. Okay, we are hiring.
For those of you in your career path where you're at the point where you can choose your next supervisor, this would be an amazing opportunity.
But this is not just an outsourced operation here. Takes a lot of staff teamwork to give them what they need. So.
And across several departments too. I mean, Team CFO does a lot, but it really is a cross-collaborative effort across the district. Yeah.
Thank you, directors. If I could also add an appreciation for Mr. Gillette's work in going through our numbers with a fine-tooth comb, and to Chief Delgadillo and the whole budget and finance team, gold star to them. But as a superintendent, and I do read it carefully, there's nothing more concerning than making sure that the fiscal health of the organization is well, and so we don't take it for granted. It's due to a lot of continued attention. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. The board will now vote on Resolution 642, acceptance of the annual comprehensive financial report, reports to management, and the report on requirements for federal awards. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Resolution 6422 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg voting.
Yes.
Thank you. Tonight, we're going to have the first reading of the revised workplace harassment policy, 5.10.060P. Director Brim Edwards, would you like to introduce this?
So the first policy revision that.
Oh, your mic. Thank you.
Thank you. The first policy revision we have before us for a first reading, or also known as the introduction of the policy revisions, relates to the workplace harassment. This was unanimously recommended from the committee to the full board for introduction. Essentially, the 2019 legislature made a number of revisions to statutes related to employment, and also ask us or had districts make changes relating to gender identity. So these revisions, they're actually relatively minor to the longer policy, but essentially reflect the inclusion of gender identity within the list of protected classes, and also expands the definition of harassment beyond harassment arising from conduct constituting discrimination. So we have that policy that came out of committee, and the proposed policy and revisions will be posted on the board website, and the public comment period is a minimum of 21 days. Contact information for public comment will be posted with the policy. The board will hold a second reading if we don't have substantial changes to the policy at the January 11th meeting. Should I just proceed to the next first readings that we have? Is that
yes,
I've
please.
just got a pile here. So the next.
You have a pile, and we are a little behind, so
I'll
quick
just
reminder.
crank through. So we have some first readings and then some second readings. So first readings, we have another set. We're continuing on with our rescissions, which, as everybody recalls, we're going through our policy manual and looking for places where we have things that aren't actually policy, or that need to be revised based on either statute or our current practices. And so the two policies we're recommending for revision is 1.10 rescission is 1.10.020 definitions. This policy was adopted in 1971 and amended in 2002. We don't need to have definitions in our policy, and they don't add particular value to the policy manual. The second policy we're recommending for rescission is teacher membership on committees is 2.40.010. It was adopted in 1971, amended in 2002. And we have this as just a general practice, so we don't need it in policy. So those, again, just these two, just like the workplace harassment revisions, will be posted for a minimum of 21 days for public comment. We welcome any comment, and we'll act on them and have a second reading or adoption once we have that 21 days, so that could be in January. Should I just roll into the second readings?
I was just going to say yes, please.
Okay. And I want to thank all the committee members because it's an efficient committee on most things. We're efficient where efficiency is called for. So the next policy that we had a first reading on earlier, and so this is a second reading or approval. It's relating to amendments to the cafeteria plan, and that's 5.10.090. And I think with one fell swoop, we're getting like eliminating about 100 pages, very detailed provisions in the. Yeah, I like by accident printed it out.
Therefore, reinforcing why it should be shortened.
Yeah, it was all on post-consumer recycled paper, though. So essentially, we took out the cafeteria plan.
Responsibly recycled.
Yeah, we took out all the details of the cafeteria plan, and essentially, just when there needs or legally required changes to the district cafeteria plan. And again, this isn't relating to what we're serving for lunch. It's relating to employee. It's relating. Well, okay, it relates to employee benefits, and going forward, they'll be publicly posted for 10 days. So just like a transparency, putting it on, posting it up. And then any financial implications, since it deals with benefits, will be shared with the board, and that the plans will sort of automatically adjust after 10 days. Any changes to the cafeteria plan that are material will be approved by the board, and the plan will be publicly posted. So that is that came out of committee with a unanimous recommendation. No public comment. So, Madam Chair, if you want a motion for adoption of the new policy.
I'm making a motion.
Excuse
Are we
me.
motioning? I'm sorry. I'll wait.
Next, we will vote on the 3 revised policies and a slate of policy rescissions. They've all been open for public comment and to date have not received any comments, as will have been discussed at the board's policy committee meetings. And we're going to go through one by one. I'll start with revised cafeteria plan, not what's on the menu.
We just did that.
Okay. The next one is, but my script is asking us for us to go through them.
Oh, you want me to do all 3 of them?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's the first one.
Okay.
So, Directors Green
Yes,
and
I'm
Hollins,
motioning.
just wait. Okay, so that's the first one. So the second one is a resolution to adopt the revised administrative employees' terms of employment. As everyone may recall, Director Scott brought an amendment asking the policy committee to make some changes to the contract approval for senior administrators, for non-represented employees. We had a unanimous recommendation came out of the committee. It had a 21-day comment period, no comment, and so that's a set of revisions. And again, work closely with staff and the superintendent on that. Then, so that's the second one. Then the third policy is the resolution to adopt the revised vacation and district holidays for non-represented employees. It's policy 5.60.31. We had so this is the second reading. We had a first reading. We had some changes at the, not the last board meeting, the board meeting before. And then we had another 21-day comment period. We had no public comment. I am going to note that there were like Scribner corrections that were made that I suggested in committee that I'm not seeing carried over into at least what I printed out.
I did think I saw them in what I looked at.
I did too.
Yeah.
Really?
It's that recycled tree that you
So,
cut down.
because this is Director Scott. See, that's what I printed out.
What's on the board box? That's what I'm looking.
Well, that's what I printed out.
No, in board books, it's the
correct?
clean draft is correct.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
We're gonna blame that on your recycled paper from the recycled tree and all of that. And
It's just how it printed out, which was without the amendments. Okay, so never mind. So we have So this is another policy that also at the last committee meeting, everybody has an opportunity to, if board members want to raise things. There was some slight adjustments made, but they were more just editing, polishing ups for that one. And then we also had, in addition to those three substantive policy changes, we had two sets of rescissions. We had a first set that was out for public comment on November 16th, the evaluation of teachers, and also one on planning time. Then we had a second set of rescissions that were out for public comment that also we're going to adopt and rescind. And those related to traffic safety patrols, student interviews and errands, health services, dental health services, physicians and mental health of staff members, career education and learning opportunities. And we received no public comment on any of those as well. So we have 8 rescissions and 3 substantive policies, and you want to take them all at once as a package?
I'm just trying to write them all down.
You're getting a no. Should we?
I'm going to go ahead and read through the script then, because I'm jotting them down and I want to make sure we're, for the record, that we have everything correct. So, pardon I'm lost in my place. So we're going to vote on 3 revised policies and a slate of rescissions, and they've all been open for public comment. To date, we haven't received any comments. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit lost on this.
No, you keep
so we have not received any comments, as well as they've been discussed at the board policy committees. And so I'll start with the revised cafeteria plan policy 5.10.090.
I'm motioning.
Do I have a motion and a second to adopt?
I'm motioning.
Resolutions 6417. We'll say Green and Constam. I'm going to throw one. You're going to have to listen carefully next time. I might throw something in there that you want to.
I'm still going to
pay
make a motion.
attention to. Director Green moves. Director Constam seconds adoption of Resolution 6417. And is there any board discussion? Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
The board will now vote on Resolution 6417, resolution to adopt revised PPS cafeteria plan policy 5.10.090. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Resolution 6417 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg unofficially voting.
Yes. Bless you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6418? That's the resolution
So
to.
moved. Second.
We're going to have to arm wrestle after this. Resolution to adopt revised vacation and district holidays for non-representative employees, policy 5.60.031. Do I have a motion and a second?
It's already beaten.
Okay, so
Derek
moved.
Scott.
Okay. And I didn't hear who seconded it because you were so fast.
Dr. Hollins.
Hollins, thank you. Dr. Hollins.
You gotta be quick on the draw here. I'm motioning.
For my safety.
Yeah, we should. Just bring a long stick next time. Okay, sorry.
So moved.
Is there any board discussion or any public comment? The board will now vote on Resolution 6418, resolution to adopt revised vacation and district holidays for non-represented employees. Policy 5.60.031. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 And all opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Sorry, 6418. Can we redo that vote? All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6418 is approved by a vote of 6-1, with Student Representative Weinberg unofficially voting.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to Administrative Employees Terms of Employment Policy 5.60.010P, Do I have a
So
motion
moved.
and a second to adopt Resolution 6419? Resolution to adopt revised administrative employees terms of employment policy 5.60.10. We have Green and Constam.
Yes.
Director Green moves, Director Constam seconds
That is
the
correct.
adoption of Resolution 6419. Is there any board discussion or any public comment? The board will now vote on Resolution 6419, resolution to adopt revised administrative employees terms of employment policy 5.60.010. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Resolution 6419 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with student representative voting.
Yes.
Madam Chair, just to note, I'm going to have a statement to submit for the record about my no vote. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, and you can state your case.
I also will have a statement to submit to the record about the vacation policy.
I think I'm going to have a statement, I guess, too.
And I'm not going to have any statements. But since everybody else is talking, I'm going to go ahead and talk. And I'm afraid that we're setting a precedent that the way you get stuff through is wait till the end. But it's okay, because it's working.
Shall we, in terms of process, get through this and have the statements at the end?
No, we'll submit a written statement.
Apparently, we're submitting secret statements, so it's fine.
Yes, they're going to be in private.
There'll be written statements for the record.
Yes.
Written statements.
Written private statements for the public that only the public can see. Okay.
Will those be in invisible ink? Moving forward. I can't remember if we voted on this one or not. It looks like we did.
But I'll say yes again, just in case.
Thank you, Director Green. Next, do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6420? Do you know what this one is about?
The one that needs to be moved on. That is the
It's
one.
a resolution to rescind the board policies that we just heard listed out by Director Brim Edwards. Do we have a motion on the table already? Do I have a second to adopt?
This is all the rescissions together?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
It's traffic safety patrols, student interviews and errands,
All
health
of them.
services, dental
Yeah,
health
we
services.
shouldn't be sending kids to run errands. I don't know. what
Dental
it's
health
about.
services, career education, physical and mental health of staff members, planning time. We do have on the table a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6420. Director Green moves and Director Holland seconds the adoption of Resolution 6420. Is there any board discussion? And is there any public comment?
I just want to thank staff again and Director Brim Edwards as chair of the policy committee for all of the work that's gone into really making our policies better and our work more efficient.
And more climate friendly if we don't print out those 100-page policies.
I'm glad everybody was gone when she said that.
The board will now vote on Resolution 6420. That's the resolution to rescind the board policies. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Resolution 6420 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Weinberg voting.
Yes.
Other business, committee referrals, items pulled from the consent agenda, or comments?
Happy holidays.
Okay. Is there any other business before we adjourn? The next meeting, regular meeting, will be on January 11th, and we hope everyone has a safe and restful holiday break, celebrated with those who you choose. We look forward to seeing you in the new year, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.